Hypothetically, we are live. Well, Philip, how are you doing today?
Grand. Um, Excited for today and the finger braiding that I'll be hopefully not messing up.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Cynically, I feel like people will be more excited if you do.
I probably
I mean,
will. Like,
I'm not, but oh shoot, did I just put a freaking Sharpie on my silk veil? Gosh darn it. No, maybe I didn't. Okay. I'm just saying, I'm just calling it like it is. I mean, I want you to succeed I really want you to succeed a lot, but we all know how this goes. Okay, so
hmm,
today, everyone, Philip from Irish Medieval History has joined me, Rachel, the Creative Contessa, in our respective spaces for a 15th century finger loop braiding lesson. And this is a technique that is going to teach him how to make things that are actually very useful for even medieval Irishmen, especially Irish men at arms, actually. So we're going to be making finger loop braiding basically makes, it's the camera, makes something like this, right? It makes what's called a narrow wear. And there's 41 different kinds of braids we could be doing today. So we've got lots of options. And the one that I'm going to be teaching you the most basic of them today, but from one setup of 5 bows, you're going to be able to do 3 different kinds of braids, basically.
hmm.
So yeah. So Philip, what do you know anything about finger loop braiding at all? Have you heard me talking about it in any way, shape, or form?
Well, the only finger loop braiding that I know of from the early medieval period would be the finger loop braiding that we have in Dublin that would be used for. There's a technique where you can use finger loop braiding on the cloaks, and from there you can actually put in fringes and stuff. So I am aware of finger loop braiding used with cloaks for making fringes during the early medieval period within Dublin. Other than that, I've always imagined they could be used as belts. Could they be used as belts? No.
Yeah, it can absolutely.
Oh.
In fact, the one that I accidentally made so long because Brian made the 5-foot bows actually makes a very not with the Sharpie, actually makes a pretty good belt thing like
Oh
that.
well. There you go.
Yeah, so yeah. It's funny. Until I really started teaching workshops on finger loop braiding and really started doing the deep research into it, I was not even aware of how widespread this technique is. So, for instance, Yuki might be interested to know that they were doing finger loop braiding in 15th century Japan, for
Mm,
instance,
yeah,
right?
that's probably why Yuki's so good at it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's
I
and
don't.
it predates Kumohimo. Everyone thinks that Kumohimo is a medieval technique. It's not. The Kumohimo loom, that's a post-medieval invention, I think 18th century, pretty
Yeah.
late actually. And before that, they were doing finger loop braiding and some other techniques as well.
Mm,
So, this is the kind of thing that's actually seems to be prevalent across all of Eurasia and for thousands of years. The earliest finds that I can think of, that of which I'm aware, date back to like the 4th century BCE in Hallstatt,
mm.
Austria. So, oh boy, now I'm going to get to write with my left hand on my right finger. This is going to go well. So this sickly little thing I'm drawing, this is an A. This poor little guy is a B. So the reason I'm marking my fingers like this, can you guess why I might be marking my fingers like this other than to look like a stylish ex-convict?
For me personally, now last time I did finger loop braiding was back in 2018. So I did not do this by myself. So there's still a very, very, very good chance I'll mess this completely up. But when I was doing it, there was a lot of moving with the fingers. So I was doing it under supervision, and even under supervision, I was still messing up my fingers because literally you're trying to move. First off, you have to tie it up, and then you're trying to move your fingers around, and it's really easy to get it all tangled up. That's why I'm pretty confident. Well, hopefully I don't. I don't want turning around and saying, "Oh, I know I'm gonna." No, I need to be confident that I won't. But it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, so the fingers are labeled because in the original 15th century instructions, they actually label the fingers with letters.
Mm,
And that's really fantastic because normally, I'm going to be honest, medieval instructions for anything are a joke usually. Like they are clearly meant for someone who already knows what they're doing.
Mm,
So, for instance, medieval cooking manuals say things like, take a capon and boil it, and then toss in the usual amount of spices, and then hang it up as you do with this other animal. And you're like, okay, but I have to know what the usual amount of spices in, how long you boil things in your kitchen, also how to make this other thing you just referenced, right? And
yeah.
that's a medieval recipe. So whenever I find medieval instructions that are actually like crystal clear, as though explaining them to a child, I almost feel like I've reached the end of my life. Like I can die happily at that point.
Mm.
And
But
finger loop
this is
braiding instructions are that detailed.
yeah. But this is what I was thinking about last week. You know, when you get somebody from 500 AD, and then you send them to the future in 15. Was it the 16th century, right? So you send them to the 16th century. Those two people, the person from 500 AD would think the person from the 16th century was a genius. Oh my God, you've improved in so much that I've been trying to work with for
Right.
so long. If they were to send that person into our period and get them talking to a commoner in this day and age, they would think that person was an idiot. They'd be like, why
Yeah.
can you not do this? Why can you not do that? Why can you not survive outside over nighttime? Are you stupid? Like, what is wrong
Right.
with you?
Yeah. And how have you reached the age you have? I don't
No.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's amazing how much basic level knowledge we've forgotten. And actually, I've read several academic essays that say that is actually the beginning of a dark age, is when a
Mm.
society becomes so technologically advanced that they don't know how to function without their technology anymore.
Oh, we're
Like
definitely in a
that's,
dark age. We're definitely
yeah.
after 1984. We definitely came into a dark age. Definitely.
Yeah. No, I really no, I really feel like we are. We're already
Mm.
there. Like we just
Yeah.
we just haven't had the good grace to acknowledge it yet.
We're too stupid to realize it.
Right?
Yeah. There's a gas that causes you to become ignorant before it slowly shuts down your brain. And there was a test run somebody went through. That particular gas wasn't going to be fatal, but it pretty much was doing the same thing as in causing his brain to become numb and ignorant. While he was
Right.
on the gas, he didn't realize he was slowly but surely becoming ignorant. He just didn't realize that even when he was solving puzzles, he thought the puzzle was stupid, not him. That's
Oh, wow.
fascinating. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, see, exactly.
Mm,
It's although I would never use the example of the poor frog who, gets boiled alive slowly. People don't realize you've heard of that experiment, right? The frog
yeah.
that, no, well, what's wrong with that experiment? Do you know what they did to the frog?
What going?
They removed his brain.
Oh well, there you go. Yeah.
They removed his brain and then put him in the pot and then set the water to boil. Yeah, of course,
Mm,
the brainless frog isn't going to leave the pot of boiling water. He's no
mm,
longer has a brain. I think they
yeah.
removed his upper cortex, or like they left his brain stem in and removed the upper part of his brain. And apparently, you do need the upper part of your brain in order to respond to stimulus like heat. But, so
Mm,
everyone talks about, well, it's really easy not to notice you're in a bad situation when it comes on slowly. And then they talk about that poor frog. And I'm like, have you had your brain removed? Bad example then.
yeah. 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 That's an absolute fact. Okay, so let's
Okay,
see if I can
so
car crash it.
the first thing that you need to know, and you don't have to label your fingers. I'm doing this for everyone else's benefit, including yours. And let me see
Mm,
if I can position this a little better without it dropping on my head. Okay. So we have your index fingers are A,
mm,
your middle finger is B,
mm.
your ring finger is C, and your pinkies are D. You're actually not going to need your pinkies today. I don't know why. I started tattooing myself up, and I guess I got excited. I don't know. So today we're only going to need A, B, and C on both
Okay.
hands. That's it. Just A, B, and C, because we're going to be working with 5 loops. And basically, you'll always have 3 loops on one hand and 2 loops on the other. So you only need these. So what I want you to do to start, and anyone who's joining us in this, I want you to take your fingers and I want you to kind of flex them and release them, flex them and release them. And I want you to really feel the articulation in your fingers. Like try to use every joint. Most people just kind of let their fingers flop and there's no control, but I want you to really try to control your muscles and your motion. And then I want you to take your fingers specifically and I want you to make claws, like as though you have arthritis. So I apologize to anyone who has arthritis. I'm not trying to mock you or anything like that. But I will often make a reference to arthritic fingers. And that's on purpose because the way you can prevent yourself from dropping your bows, because we're going to be working with bows of yarn, is to keep your fingers hooked, right? So we want to keep them hooked. So just take a moment and flex your fingers. So feel that you can flex them in and out without them going completely relaxed, right? It's not that you're here, cutting off the circulation. You can actually extend your fingers quite a ways and they're still hooked. And, you can bring them in and then they're more hooked. But what we never want to do when we're finger loop braiding is this. Because if you do this, you're going to lose, you're going to drop your loops, right? So that's why we want to make sure we keep these fingers in a nice crochet hook kind of thing. Okay. Now, I want you to keep your fingers in that attitude, and I want you to practice opening your arms as wide as you can in your space, whatever that is, right? Just open them up and close them and keep your fingers in that attitude, right? This is so that you actually learn to, when you're opening your arms, to not just let your fingers relax, because that's another thing people do. Because part of the finger loop braiding process is we're going to be tightening our bows by opening our arms. And what a lot of people do is they let their fingers relax and then, the loops drop. So opening our arms and keeping the fingers hooked, closing them still hooked, opening them, keeping them hooked, closed, and they are still hooked. Yeah, so finger loop braiding, that's a good comment. Making finger loop braids always seemed to me a thing that looks more complicated than it probably is in practice. Pepper tea, yes, that is absolutely true. It's one of those things that it's complicated to describe, and it looks complicated because it's all these strings and it's fingers and it's arms, but once you actually get the pattern down, it's not complicated at its basis. I say that, and then there are literally 46 step braids that I do. So this is not one of them, Philip. Panic not. This is like 4 steps.
Okay, hopefully.
4 steps for 1 repeat, not 46 steps for 1 repeat. Okay. So those just joining us, I'm the Creative Contessa, and this is Philip from Irish Medieval History. And today I'm going to teach him and you, hopefully, to finger loop braid, which is an ancient all the way up to early Baroque art by which people could create really neat trims and laces and braids that you could put on garments that you can use to lace up your doublets if you're men, your farsetti, your gowns if you're women, right? Or not your gowns, your kirtles, because a gown is actually something men and women wore in the 15th century. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually get set up. So you have, I believe, 2 colors of yarn?
Yes, I do.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to do the very simple thing of, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off, it doesn't matter from which one. I want you to cut off about, yeah. So unless you want to use your teeth, and dear viewer, please don't use your teeth for this. Not good. It is. So it used to be that women, especially weavers, people who worked in Korea, people who worked in rami, which is nettlecloth, in Europe, people who worked in flax, they would use their teeth as part of the retting process and working the string, and they would actually develop grooves in their teeth that would eventually eat through the enamel. So
I'm not saying I do stuff like that. So if I put my hand out like this will be enough to cut off like that.
Oh yeah, so we're going to be working with a very short one. So don't fear not. I'm going to show you how we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is actually we want to cut off what's going to be our anchor thread. So in essence, the finger loop braiding, we're going to have our loops, our bows, as they're called in 15th century English, and they will be attached to something. And so we need an anchor thread for the attachment. So we're going to take care of that first. So just like, I like to make it about a foot doubled, just so I have plenty of anchor to work with. And the reason I double it is because in the case of finger loop braiding, more is more. I forget, do you guys use imperial or metric in Ireland?
Oh, I think we're on the metric right now. Someone
Okay,
will
well then I don't
correct me in the
know,
comment section.
like
But last time
40,
before I left, I'm
40
sure we're on metric.
centimeters-ish, roughly, whatever works for
Yeah.
you. I'm a polyglot when it comes to measurement systems. I even know Korean units of measure.
Mm.
Okay, so this thing that we just cut off, this is our anchor. This is not going to be woven. This is what will be holding our boas, as they're called, to some point of furnishings, our toe, something. So we can set that aside once we've cut it. And the reason I like to double it up is for extra strength, because this, as an anchor, like an anchor for a ship, you don't want your anchor chain coming loose while you're still trying to be anchored. So more is more in this case. Okay. Oh, I can see my bun is coming out. I may have to change headdresses. Okay, everyone, I'm changing because I did not have any ladies' maids to help me get dressed today or condottieri. So switching to my coif. The problem with my bonnet is that it needs to be pinned to my head, and I can't do that myself without giving myself a cranectomy. So I'm not excited about a cranectomy, so we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Okay, all coifed up. Right. So now we're going to have 5 bows, 5 loops in the modern parlance, and so we need 2 of one color and 3 of the other. I don't care which you pick. Whichever color you like more should be the 3 loop one, and whichever color you like less should be 2. And for our purposes today, especially because we're still practicing, I'm actually going to use my forearm to create my loops. So I'll show you how that works. I think all the kitties are sleeping, so we should be okay. Okay, so I'm going to grab the thread in between my thumb and my hand just to hold it. And then I'm just going to wrap it around my forearm like this. Okay. Wrap it twice or 3 times, whichever you want for that color. So I'll demonstrate that again. Grab between my thumb and my index finger, finger A as it's called, and then I wrap. And you want to make sure that your loops are the same length. So make sure you wrap them in the same spot, right? Don't put one kind of on your elbow and one near your bicep, right? You want them to be the same length. The other thing to note when this is called warping. Actually, when you're warping your bows, you don't warp them by stretching them, right? Some yarn has more stretch than others, and so you don't want to pull really tight because you will then kind of pull unevenly and your loops will end up being a different length. So you just want to just sort of run it around with normal tension, not with, manly force, as it were.
Yeah.
Okay, so now
maybe I should do it again. Give us a second.
Now that we've created those 2 loops, we're going to snip. And when you snip, make sure you leave enough to tie a knot, right? So you want to have like 3 inches extra, 3 to 4 inches extra hanging off, like a 10 centimeters extra hanging off on the front and 10 extra centimeters hanging off on the back so that you can tie a knot. So if you didn't do that, rewrap it so that you have excess on the front and the back end so that you have ties, ends with which you can actually tie a knot.
I reckon that's 10 inches.
Yeah, but whatever, just enough to be able to tie a knot. 10 centimeters, and inches might be way too much. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my two ends, these 2 little ends, and I'm going to just wrap them around the bundle, like counter wrap, so that they surround the bundle going in the opposite directions. And then I'm going to tie a knot over that so that they are secure.
I think I have an idea of what you're doing.
Yeah. So now you have one bundle that is knotted, all separate, and you can even, for extra security, you can always take your ends and counter wrap them again around the end of that bundle so that you can have even more security. More is more in this case, it really is. Because I have had many instances where the laces, the bows actually came undone in the middle of braiding, and that was it. That was all she wrote. No more working with that set. I had to cut it off and start again from the point where everything went bad. Okay, so by the way, for those of you joining us, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, pop them in the live chat. Unfortunately, we may or may not be seeing all of the live chat depending on the platform you're on, in which case we apologize profusely. We're working with some technology that is maybe above our pay grade.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. Okay, so we have our 2 loops. Are you all set with your 2 loops?
Right. So you tied the bottom and the top of you, or have you just done the?
So I did
just
just, yeah, you only tie it at the one end. The other end is completely open because you want those to come out. So only at the bottom where you started, basically. Right?
Yeah.
Got that. Great. Okay. Set those aside. And now let's make our 3 loops in the other color, and the exact same process, just in this other color.
Okay, Roger.
I'm really shocked. My cats must be absolutely passed out. Normally they hear yarn and they will wake up from a comatose slumber to come and chase it and make a mess of my live stream.
Oh,
yeah,
lovely.
Right? Like they can sense the yarn. Okay, so for those of you joining us, once again, we're wrapping loops. This is my 3 loop bundle. We've just made a 2 loop bundle. And once again, I want to leave a little tail so I have enough to actually tie this packet off. And once again, I want to make sure that the loops are wrapping in the same spot around my arm and that I'm not pulling too tightly on the yarn so that I'm not stretching it artificially. Okay. And once I wrap it, I take my yarn and I cut it so that I have a tail on both sides where I started the wrapping and where I ended the wrapping. And then I take my ends and I counter wrap under and around, kind of making a package, a knot around the bundle, binding the bundle. I'm certain in sailing there's a word for this, right? Like sailing, not the nautical arts have all the language for tying things up.
Oh, they do.
And then
especially when they're screaming at each other.
Once we have wrapped those ends, we tie a knot around it so that it is secure. And there we have our second package. Let's see, figure out this camera. Okay, brilliant. Oh yeah, those prison tattoos really show up in the upper angle.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Oh my God. This is why we're going to get banned because of that, probably. If you have any questions, just pop them in the live chat, everyone, and we will see them and answer them. If you're on YouTube, we will definitely see them. If you're streaming in from somewhere else, we may or may not see them, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Okay, I don't know. Philip, do you have eyes on us in any other platform?
I don't know. My TikTok and Instagram is acting. Oh, no, you're live on TikTok. You're live on TikTok. I don't know about me.
Yeah, I can't find me when I'm live on TikTok. Like, I don't know how to find myself on TikTok when I'm live. How crazy is that?
You're blaring. You're blaring on my side, so I assume everyone can see you on TikTok. I'll actually, do you know what? Is there a way? Actually, do you know what I'll do? I will actually just click on you all together on your live stream and then just turn off your sound. Oh no, you can't.
Okay.
Sound goes add on.
Well, while you do that, I will explain to our viewers. We have now we're doing today a finger loop braid in modern terms called lace making in 15th century English. This predates bobbin lace. So what we're doing today is what lace used to be, what laces used to be, before bobbin lace actually co-opted the term lace in the 17th century. But until the 17th century, it was called something else. It was called passementerie, parchmenterie. It didn't become the primary word for lace until the 17th century. Until that point, whenever people talked about laces, this is what they meant, usually 90% of the time. And bobbin lace isn't even invented. It doesn't appear until the early 16th century. So yeah, it's a much later development than the laces we're doing today. So we're doing a broad lace. We're doing several laces of 5 bows today, actually. The bows are, that's the 15th century word for loop. And so far, Philip and I have, I believe, successfully made our 2 packets, one of 2 loops, boas, one of 3 bows.
I've got loops
Fantastic.
there now.
Okay, so now we're going to unite them in some kind of weird matrimony. We're going to put them together, and you want to line up your knots. So the 2 knot packets that we've made, we want them to be in the same spot. And I'm left-handed, so I'm draping them on my left hand. If you are right-handed, then drape them on your right hand. If you are left-handed, drape them on your right hand, because you'll be using your left hand for this next thing. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our anchor yarn that we cut at the very beginning of this process. So we go ahead and find that. And we're going to now attach the anchor yarn to our loops. And I will demonstrate first, and then I will break it down. So this is more or less at speed what we're going to do. Demonstrate first, and then I'll get back to it. Explain step by step what I just did. Okay, and then thereby we have this finished packet. Okay, let me undo that and explain the process step by step. Right, okay, so we take our 2 little packets, 2 little knots, line them up. We take our anchor thread, yarn in this case, right? And so what I do is I actually drape it over just my index finger so that the other fingers of my left hand are actually available for what's about to happen here. And we're going to grab one end of that yarn and wrap it around behind so that the yarn is now completely behind the 2 sets of loops. And then we're going to grab the other end so that we now have a horseshoe with our anchor and a horseshoe with our loops. So we've got 2 horseshoes basically at this point that are kind of joined in a perpendicular fashion. And then I'm going to twist this so that it becomes an X, basically. I'm going to reach through the knotted end of my 2 packets. I'm going to grab that X, the place where your anchor loops cross. Going to grab that. Drop it with my right hand. I'm going to grab the loop, the non-knotted end of my bows, of my loops. And then I'm just going to pull the anchor through like that. And so now you'll have to pull out like your little tails. You'll have to kind of unearth them from your anchor packet, but they're less important. They will not really play much of a role. They will not get in the way if they happen to still be in there. Don't worry about them. Okay. So now we have anchor on one end and bows on the other, and everything is fully secure. Do you have something that's vaguely like this?
Not yet.
Okay, I can walk you through it again.
I'm still tying stuff up, so maybe I'll get there. We'll see.
Then I will definitely undo this and walk you through it. So what are you still tying up?
Just the bottom part into the anchor, I think.
Okay. Okay, so this is one of those things that once you get it and understand what's happening, you realize, oh, that's super easy. It's just a question of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And the thing about this anchor, what's good about there's different methods of anchoring, right? The reason I like this method is because it prevents your loops from migrating in the anchor. There are other anchor methods that are simpler maybe, but if you pull on one loop versus the other, you'll actually get this migration thing, and that's bad. So this secures everything pretty firmly. So let me see. Okay, so where are you in the process?
almost just tightening up my bottom anchor now. So I have my 2 white loops and I have my 3 loops at the top. I'm just tying it onto the table now. That sounds about
Oh,
right.
did
Yeah?
you already got your anchor in? Okay, great.
Almost.
Okay, now I actually realized that I need an anchor. So I'm going to grab this chair, handily located. And I'm going to grab a weight of somehow these big heavy weight. Not get put away. Okay. Thank God for
I have
cast
anchor.
iron barbells. Okay, so we are now going to see where this is actually visible. Yes, great.
Hopefully
Fantastic.
Yuki doesn't
Okay.
come in and judge my anchor.
Okay, well, while
While I
we're
was
figuring,
doing the while I was doing the anchor, I have a knot like at the bottom part of it, but I'm like, no, the camera can't see that. It's grand. Then Yuki's gonna come in and be like, "What
so
the hell is
so
that?"
so ideally, this is what you should have. This is kind of how it should look at the point of your anchor and your loops. So all the knots should basically be kind of they should all be bundled together and here on the other side of the anchor. That is the ideal situation. That's what we want, and I'll do it from this camera.
Don't look at my
Sorry.
anchor, Yuki. Don't look at the anchor. Don't
Okay,
judge
so
the anchor.
here's my question. Are your knots, how far
The
up
finger braid is
the
grand
loops are
though.
your
Look at the
knots?
finger.
Because that might be disruptive.
What's that, Rachel?
How far up your loops are the knots? Because ideally they should really be at the end here, on the other side of the anchor.
Well, I've got what was it? It looks grand on the camera. That's the main thing, right? So I actually have the finger bits here, right? That's grand,
That's
right?
yeah, no, absolutely. That's all that matters. No one can see the knots. My only concern, okay, the important thing is that the knots are somehow secured by your anchor. That's what matters.
They're secure, aren't they, Yuki? Yuki's having a heart
Oh
attack
my
there in the
God, she's
corner of
laughing so
laughter.
much. Oh my God. Oh crap. Okay, wait, we've got a question. Is Fingerloop
Don't
Braid
take a picture. Do not take
while
a
Philip
picture.
and Yuki laugh at the thing I can't see, which is frustrating to me. Okay, Pepper T has a question. Is Fingerloop Braid what they use for lacing up these dresses? Yes, it is. It is indeed. In fact, I've got a Fingerloop Braid that's called a green dorge, which I have a tutorial for this on my channel, The Creative Contessa on YouTube. So absolutely, this is definitely what they use for lacing up dresses. In fact, I made a new one the other day. Camera's over here, right? It's brown, so it doesn't show up particularly well. I made a new one the other day. They use this for lacing up dresses. They use this for pointing armor. By the way, this kind of finger loop braiding was used to make points for armor. So for men at arms out there, you need a whole bunch of finger loop braids. Also for your doublets, for ties, for cloaks, for instance, for trim, men and women. For purse strings, for seal strings, for sealing documents. If you weren't aware that in the Middle Ages, they would seal documents, official documents, with a seal, but the seal was actually not attached straight to the parchment. It would just fall off. A finger loop braid was actually put through the folded end of the parchment. A seal was sealed over top of the finger loop braiding. And so that's how seals were attached. So that's how we have a lot of our extant seals or finger loop braids are from medieval documents that are in archives. So yeah, there's so many options for this. There's some 2-person braids that make a 3-layer lace, like literally 3 layers woven on top of each other. And that would be really great for, say, armor, for pointing your armor, your harness to your pourpoint. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and now anchor to a spot. And when you're anchoring to a spot, it should be a spot that doesn't move. If it moves, you're going to have an interesting experience. And I usually wrap my anchor thread or yarn around the point, a couple of the thing to which I'm tying off a couple of times just for extra security. right? But you know, to each their own. Okay, let me see if this
Oh,
is
I see what
actually.
I've actually done. Uh-oh.
Do you need to
Yeah,
redo it?
maybe. I hope I don't undo the knot that I did at the start.
So let me I can actually show you how to take your anchor out without getting because I take anchors out all the time. Let me undo this.
Because I made the two of them separately, Yuki, and
Oh
then
yeah.
I was anchoring it. So I've anchored the white one perfectly. It's the green one because they're both two green colors. I think I got mixed up, so that's why there's two loops. I mean, two knots, two knots in the green. I know what happened because the second knot is here. So, did you see what I'm doing? You see what I did, right? So this is the anchor.
How hard?
Yuki, be
Because
my eyes. What's happening?
what's that? That's what I was supposed to do. So you can see that with the white. I've tied the white and the anchor together. You can see that. Yeah, you can. But you can see that's the anchor, and that's just a random green. But the
That's
actual
just a
the end knot
random
is there.
green. Oh my
It's
god.
grand. It looks grand on the camera. Anyway, where's my? I've ended up making an even bigger mess as well. Trying to fix that one, I've made a bigger mess.
Look,
What?
cut it off the table and make a new one.
But then I'd have to start all over again.
I don't think you can hypothetically you should actually be able to pick your anchor out like I'm doing. Like you should be able to pick out just the anchor and not without unknotting anything. Actually, the anchor should be able to just come out.
I think I'm making this worse. 1 second. No, if I tidy it up, no, actually, I still have the two. This is 1, 2. Yeah, I think I'm actually going to save this. 1 second. This is going to be saved. I swear.
Wanted to say hello, and this is going to be a fun episode. Tim, welcome back. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining in my getting dressed video earlier. Really appreciated having a sane, not kind, polite person there in that live chat. The horror that was that live chat was my fault for not setting it to subscribers only. That was on me.
Oh, the lunatics again.
Oh my, nasty, really nasty lunatics. Like incels who are looking to try to get a rise out of me by casting aspersions on my looks and saying all kinds of disgusting things. Yeah, it was pretty bad. That was on me for not setting it to subscribers only. And the other thing I can do, and I need to start doing this, I can set the chat in the live streams to be subscribers who've been subscribed for a minimum of 5 minutes, because usually those kinds of reprobates get tired of waiting that long to be able to say the ugly thing. So, yeah. Okay, shall we try this again? Did you remove your anchor?
What's funny is I wrecked up my what was it, finger braid, but I actually say my anchor's perfectly fine. My anchor's still anchored.
Okay, that's not good.
1 second. I reckon I can fix it if I just do this. 1 second. 1, 2, 3.
Missy Juju, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, so if you have any questions, everyone, pop them in that live chat. I think, unfortunately, we can probably only see the YouTube comments, which is annoying. We should be able to see everyone's, but we can't. So here's the question. So basically, if you can braid your hair, you can do finger looping. Yeah, you should be able to do exactly. If you can, especially if you can do a French braid. But yeah, I mean, so finger loop braiding is a little more complicated than a 3-strand braid, but once you get the basics down, it's really not complicated from there. So it's just a question of getting in that base muscle memory, and then it's all good. Yeah, I would definitely say. And the one we're doing today is just a 4-step braid. For one repeat versus like some of the really complicated ones, like my favorite, most beautiful one that I think, it's called a lace indentured. It's like 46 steps.
Grand, it's just going to be a small one, Yuki.
Yeah, it is. It is just going to be a small one. We're doing sample length today. So remember, with most finger loop braids, you lose about 20% of your length. So if you want it to be a certain length, you want to keep that in mind. So if you want it to be 20 centimeters, then you're going to need to have like 25 centimeters to start with if you want the finished product to be 20 centimeters, for instance. And that's kind of an average. Different braids have different losses depending on the complexity of the pattern. But yeah,
this one's 5. We're going for 5.
Yeah, this one's 5. Yeah. It's a 5 loop braid. Yeah, super simple. This is the basic one. And the nice thing about what I'm going to be teaching today is from basically the same pattern, just changing one minor detail, you can get 3 different braids. So we're going to work our way through the 3 different ones you can get from just one minor change. Okay, do you need me to walk you through the anchoring process this time?
No, I have the anchor. I swear I have the anchor.
Do you now?
Yeah.
On St. Bridget, do you swear now?
Well, you know, it's my version of the anchor. That's what we have. And I'm sure nothing happens to the Titanic, you know, and they had Irish people working on the Titanic, and that anchor worked perfectly fine.
It worked
you know?
perfectly.
It wasn't the anchor's fault that the Titanic sank, you know?
It isn't. In fact, it was for once not the anchor's fault.
Exactly.
Probably could have been someone who was a little in their cups who might not have noticed the looming iceberg.
And that wasn't the guy who made the anchor's fault, you know? So there.
Oh, and thank you for using CM. Do you know what CM? Oh, centimeters. Yes, you're welcome.
Oh, yeah,
I'm a polyglot of measurement, so I will switch back and forth between measurements to make sure most people in the world are covered. I also speak Korean Pyong, and I know what a kan is. So
that's better than my one.
okay, so once again, we're going to try and anchor ourselves to a thing. Philip, do you have both sets of loops anchored this time?
Yeah, but the anchoring wasn't the problem. It's just the loop, the green one anyway.
Pepper tea, believe it or not, the 46 steps, not 36, 46 steps gets you about an inch of braid.
Did you make yourself a nice anchor there, Yuki? Is it as nice as my anchor?
They look exactly the same, right? All right, there we go.
Oh, okay. You're doing it to See, Yuki's doing it. That's the Japanese way, is it?
No, it's not.
What way is that?
Roshin taught me
the
this.
Roshin way. Yuki's doing it the Roshin way.
What do you mean?
Yuki's anchored it onto her toes.
Oh yeah, you can do that too. That's they did that in the Middle Ages in Europe as well. You can absolutely anchor to your toes. I just didn't want anyone to see the mess that is my big toe. So my big toe, unfortunately, people keep like crushing my big toe while dancing, and so it keeps the toenail's not doing well.
My toes are all smashed as well. The Yuki's feet are gorgeous.
No, it's not.
Go on, Yuki. I'll put it on camera there. You don't mind going on camera, do you?
Yeah, the 46 steps for a centimeter for 2.5. We'll say 2.5 centimeters. So an inch is really beautiful. It creates this amazing bicolor wave effect. So it's got a blue background and then this wave that's on top of it. It's gorgeous. I do have an example, I think. Hold on a minute. My bag of finger loop braiding. So what do I do with all these test pieces? I put them in my magic bag of holding. And then when I need finger loop braiding for any number of medieval living history purposes, I have lots of options. Here it is. Okay, this was an example piece, so it's not the best. But where's my camera? There. This one creates is basically for one repeat of the pattern. So like that's one repeat of the pattern is like 46 steps. Yeah. But it creates a really beautiful effect. Okay, so here we go. Well, now there's a mess everywhere. Yeah. Okay, and Philip, what can you think you can do with this? It's not very long. Can you think of applications in your modern life for something that's going to be roughly this length, that's kind of a tie, a lace of sorts?
What could I use in my modern life?
Yeah.
Okay, what can we use in our modern life around the house for finger braiding? A tie for your school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I literally was the only thing that could come to my mind right now is what was it, a school tie?
Yeah. So actually, I actually use my finger loop braids, especially the short ones, to tie off packaging. Right. So like this is a bag of tea that's been open. Yeah. So and then then you don't need rubber bands, you don't need plastic, you don't need unsustainable things, and then your kitchen's a little prettier too, and it works just as well, if not better, than a rubber band because it doesn't break. So yeah, we actually use all of our little short sampler finger loop braiding for things like that. For those of you who have long hair, you can also use these shorter ties like this, for instance, for tying off braids in your hair, a ponytail. If you're into man buns, if you're a man, then you can use this to tie up your man bun. So yeah, there's basically, you can use it to replace most anything for which you have elastic bands of any kind, you know, rubber bands or hair ties, that kind of thing. Okay, so are we ready? Philip, how are you feeling?
Good, good. I'm doing amazing. My anchor is gorgeous, isn't it, Yuki?
Everything is perfect, right?
Stop laughing, Yuki.
Okay, I'm going to lower my camera a little bit, my front camera, so that you can get a better look at my hands. Okay. And aim it once again at the tapestry because no one wants to see my messy work area out there. Okay, great. This is perfect. Fantastic. Okay, can you see my fingers clearly? Is that all good for you?
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I can see. Yuki, you can see as well, can you? On the TV.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yuki can see it, I can see it.
Fantastic. So now that we're anchored, I'd like to remind everyone.
No, Yuki, don't go lower.
Why not?
Yeah, and pepper tea would absolutely make a pretty keychain for certain if you have keys. I live in Korea and no one has keys here. It's all key codes. So yeah, but definitely would make a really lovely keychain. And I don't have a car here, so but if you have a car or keys, it would indeed. Okay, so just to remind everyone, your index fingers are finger A, your middle finger is finger B, and your ring finger is finger C. And today your pinkies are just garbage fingers. You don't need them today. Our thumbs don't have a number, but your thumbs are like the Swiss Army knife of finger loop braiding. They will get used in a lot of maybe unorthodox ways today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide our bows, as they're called, onto our fingers. So we're going to start, just for the sake of argument, it doesn't have to be this way. You could start inverted, but for today, we're going to put our 2 loops on our left hand, A and B, fingers A and B.
Okay, so I'd have to switch them around.
Or I can do it the other way too, whatever works for you, Philip. I was just making
I'm special.
Making a command decision. Okay, and then with the other, we'll put on right hand A, B, and C. A, B, and C. Brilliant. Okay, looks good. Now, right, so red is on my right, yellow is on my left currently for everyone else's purposes. So what I want us to do now that we actually have, sorry, put them on, it's been a while since I've done this braid. Put them on B and C on your left hand. The 2 loops go on B and C. Yeah, B and C. So migrate them down. So we're going to do a couple of exercises before we actually start braiding to get our fingers used to working with loops. So again, I want us to practice, you know, clawing and unclawing our hands. So taking our fingers and bending them and then loosening them until they're still hooked, but longer. So we never want to do this, right? We never want to go full flat straight, that you'll drop loops and then you'll cry. So we always want our fingers to be in this kind of arthritic crook. Right, there we go. In this arthritic crook. Okay. And now we're going to practice something called migrating. And so what that means is we're going to take on our left hand, we have a free finger. A is a free finger right now. I just want you to take finger A, insert it in the loop on B, and then pull finger B out so that you migrate loop B up to finger A, right? And now we're going to practice that same thing now with our middle finger with B on the right hand, on the left hand. We're going to insert it into the loop that's currently on C, and then pull finger C out so that the loop migrates up. Okay, now let's practice that inverse. So I'm going to take finger C, insert it into the loop on B, and migrate it down. And now I'm going to take finger B and insert it into the loop on A and migrate it down.
Oh, right.
Okay, let's try that whole pattern, I just want to get us, I just want to build the skills to migrate before we actually do something drastic with these bows. So once again, we're going to take A and migrate loop B up. We're going to take finger B and migrate it up so that finger C is now free. And now we'll invert that. We'll take finger C and grab the loop from B, and we'll take finger B and grab the loop from A. Great. Okay, now for the moment, just for the moment, we're going to repeat this exercise on the right hand. So I just want you to grab, and this is something we have to do at some points anyway, take finger A on left and grab straight across the loop from A right and just bring it over to your left hand for now. So that at this point, you should have 2 loops on your right hand and 3 loops on your left hand. This is only for practicing doing this exercise of migrating. This is not part of the actual pattern. So we're just practicing the basics before I do things with you that might make you, might cause you fear and loathing. Okay, so wow, those A's look like real cuneiform A's. Wow, I really cannot write well with my left hand. Okay, so we're now going to take finger A on our right hand, grab loop B on our right hand and migrate it up. We're going to take finger B on our right hand, grab loop from C and migrate it up. And now we'll invert that. Take C right, grab the loop from B right, take B on the right hand, grab loop A. Let's do that one more time just to get the migrating. And the other thing the other thing that we need to pay attention to while we're doing this crap with our right hand, we need to make sure that we don't relax our left hand, right? So you need to keep that inactive hand art crooked. Because what can sometimes happen, we get so focused on what's happening in our right hand that we forget to look at what's happening, that our left hand needs to not relax, right? So make sure you're keeping that left hand crooked while we do this. Okay, let's try that migrating exercise one more time on the right. A takes B, B takes C, C takes B, B takes A. Okay, how did that feel?
Grand.
Okay, everyone, if I'm
I like
looking to my right, it's not because I've got someone holding a gun to my head. It's because we're over on the big screen there where I can actually clearly see Philip what he's doing.
I swear we're not forcing her to do this.
This is my idea. In fact, if anything, I'm forcing Philip to do this. Okay, so we're now just going to take, because right now we have a color in balance, and we don't want to start this way. So we're going to take finger A right and grab the loop on A left and just bring it straight across. Okay, so so now I want to practice reversing versus straight across. So there is something called taking reversed, or a technique called taking reversed, or taking the loop unreversed. Unreversed is what we just did. It literally means grabbing the loop from one finger and bringing it across without twisting it, right? So you just grab it straight across. And what that means in practical terms, the best way to guarantee it's unreversed is to grab the top of the loop. So you have 2 halves, the top part and the bottom part, right? So if you grab the top half of the loop, you will absolutely guarantee it will not reverse. Okay. And reverse is the language in the original manuscript, reversed, all syllables in 15th century English. So let's go ahead and just practice going back and forth a little bit between A, grabbing unreversed. And the key is that you want to make sure that your fingers stay crooked as you do this, right? You don't want them to relax. You don't want them to get straight. So they kind of are never, I actually, silk women who did this professionally, I have a theory that if we looked at their hands, their bones might be shaped differently by the time they, passed on to the next life, honestly. If we could identify them in the London graves, for instance. Because I think that as much fingerloop braiding as they did professionally, and it was the silk women who did this professionally all across Europe, I suspect that they probably, it actually changed their morphology. Okay, questions about unreversed? Okay, let's move on to reversed. So the thing about reversing a loop is that causes the loop to twist. And the reason that you usually reverse a loop is because you want to combine the two sides. Like you're working left and right hand, and that will technically create a left and a right braid. To make the two halves come together, there is usually at some point in the pattern a reversal that literally joins the two halves. So that's the reason that there are reversed steps in the first place. And so to reverse, you grab, instead of grasping the top of the loop, we grab the bottom of the loop, and you grab it from the back side. So don't grab it from straight on. Grab it from the back side, so that you literally, you can even, if you don't let it go, you can feel it twisting around the finger that still has the loop, right? So you grab from the back of the loop, grab the bottom, and pull it across, and that twists it. And that is what is called a reverse. Okay, now let's try that the other way. Just basically, you're going to grab it back. Right, grab it, pull it across. Let's try that again. Grab reversed. And grab reversed. Okay, questions, Philip? Does that feel cozy?
Ooh,
Nice. Okay, great. Do you have room? Do you have room to actually open your arms all the way? Great.
Yeah,
Perfect.
for this small one.
Yeah.
Like.
So if you want to make, people always ask me if you want to make really long loops. I'll talk about that once we get started. So once we get the pattern going, I'll start talking more. Okay, so here we are. We're going to be making, the first thing we're going to do is actually going to be a split braid that will make 2 braids of basically 3 loops. And you're kind of looking at your hands going, but there's 5. How does that break up into 3 each? It's the magic of finger loop math. You just have to go with it. So, so this braid will be nothing but unreversed. There will be no reversing at all, because we actually want to create 2 separate braids that stay separate. So this is a really great way if you want to make a lot of lace at once. This is a great way, if it doesn't have to be thick, this is a great way to do it, is this split braid of 5 loops. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take, so the theory of this braid in general is that both hands want 3 loops, but there's 5 loops. So there's a constant fight back and forth on which hand gets to have 3 loops, right? Yeah. So right now, the hand that has 2 loops is the one that's going to take action, because the hand that has 3 loops is happy. So the unhappy hand is going to take action. So the first thing we're going to do, and this is something we did in practice, we'll practice it now. We're going to do what's called creating a corridor. Okay, so we have these 2 loops right now, these 2 bows, as they're called in the original source, and they're separate, right? We want to make them one thing. So I'll demonstrate this 2 ways. I'll demonstrate it with my hands up, and then I'll demonstrate it with them flush. So we basically line up fingers B and C, right? And you can see that's basically now sort of semi-joined, those loops. They're still separate because they're on separate fingers, but they're together enough that I can stick my finger A through that corridor. It's what I call creating a corridor. The 15th century English is a little more complicated than that. Right? Okay, so let's practice just creating the corridor. So line up B and C, and now uncreate your corridor. And the thing about uncreating your corridor is you have to make sure that finger B is unhooked for the minimal amount of time. Right? Because if you look at my hands, it's really easy. If you don't pay attention, then finger B doesn't rehook, and then your loop will drop, right? So the thing about creating the corridor that's most important is when you come out of the corridor that you keep finger B hooked. Right? Let me know if I'm being too basic. I'm trying. I told everyone this is going to be a basic finger loop lesson, teaching all these really basic things that most people don't think about. So I hope this helps make it actually work. Okay, questions?
I'm grand. Any questions in the comment section?
Any questions from the comments? Oh man, I didn't think I was dirty-minded, but come on. What? That's someone on your channel, my friend. That's not one of mine.
Here, look. there's a reason why, well, I'm not going to go into details on this. I want to keep my, what was it?
Monetization,
What was it?
yeah.
Monetization on. Yeah. So we'll keep those jokes for tomorrow's live
That's
stream.
right. Wait, are you on someone else's channel tomorrow that they can demonetize?
What was it? I don't know. It depends. It depends if we have Kingdom Come or not on. I noticed that we can get away with. Well, I don't know. Depends
Like,
because you give the boys a line and they go running
oh my
past it
God,
with
do
the
they
jokes.
ever?
I say
Oh.
boys, and the girls are just as bad
Ach
on my
du
channel.
Scheiße, as they say in German. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create that corridor. And now we're going to take finger A and we're going to go through the corridor. And we're going to grab unreversed loop C on the right hand. Unreversed. So that means you grab the top of the loop. And then we pull A back through the corridor. And then we pull B back out of the corridor. So now we have now the left hand is the happy hand. On top, you have the odd color and the bottom two. So A has the odd color, B and C still have the matched color. And now we open up our hands like this and we tighten. Okay. Ah. I told you to take it reversed, didn't I? It shouldn't have been reversed. It should have been unreversed. That's okay. We'll fix it here. Okay, but now on the right hand, we have to migrate loops B and A down. So C takes B, B takes A.
Yeah.
And so now on the right hand, you have a loop on C and a loop on B on the right. So this is what it should look like after that first pass through. Okay. We have 3 loops on our left hand, 2 loops on our right. Finger A on the right hand is free. Okay. So now we're going to repeat that on the right hand. So we create our corridor by lining up B and C. We take finger A and we go through and grab the top of C, unreversed. It should be unreversed. We're doing the unreversed one first. So unreversed, A comes out of the corridor, B comes out of the corridor. And now we migrate on the left hand. C takes B, B takes A, and we tighten. Okay, so now I'm just a simpleton, apologies. Look, as long as it doesn't get us demonetized and it's not actually being mean and, overtly gross, I don't personally care. I don't know. How do you feel, Philip?
Me, I like medieval.
Yeah,
funny
no, I do
jokes.
too. Yeah,
Especially
just
the Scottish
as long
one,
as it's not
especially
being
the
mean
Scottish
and
one.
it's not going to get us demonetized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I like the jokes where Robert the Bruce, gets kidnapped by a woman. Those kind
Right.
of jokes are funny. But as you said there, the monetization can get
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so all good? Ready to continue? Okay, that is it. Actually, that's.
Are we on finger A?
So now exactly. So now finger A on the left is free, and so that's it. That is the whole braid. It just repeats over and over. So once again, we create the corridor on our left hand because finger A is free on the left hand. Finger A goes through our corridor, grabs C unreversed on the right. A comes out, B comes out. On our right hand, we migrate down the loops from A to B to B and C, and then we tighten. And now we repeat. Create a corridor on the right. A goes through, grabs C left. A comes out, B comes out, migrate down, and we tighten. Okay, and we just keep doing that. So create a corridor, A goes through, we come out, migrate down, create a corridor, A goes through, and we just keep going. And eventually you will actually see something happening.
One day.
Do you want me to walk you through it slowly again?
Maybe. I can't remember which way I went.
Okay. Which hand has 2 loops? Whichever one has 2 loops, is the one where you create the corridor.
Right, I'm on
Okay,
left.
create your
and
corridor.
what's it called? Yeah.
Stick your finger through, grab unreversed, migrate down on the right so that A right is free.
Oh yeah, now I remember. Right.
Okay.
Roger.
Now create a corridor on right. A goes through, A comes out, B pulls out on right. On left, B migrates down, A migrates down, and we tighten.
Right, I'm doing something anyway.
Why do you think you're doing something
I
wrong?
swear you.
Let me watch.
Right. Poof.
Right, so go through.
Poof. And then it's grab this one, and then poof, poof, and then that one, tighten, poof, poof, and tighten again, and then it's this one goes there. It's A to C.
Okay, so
and then
so A never loop A never gets grabbed, right? So
Okay.
the only loop that ever gets grabbed is C. It's only loop C that gets
Okay.
grabbed. So let me get back to a situation where you have 2 bows on your left hand and 3 on your right.
What was it? Say it again, sorry.
To get back to a situation where on your left hand you have 2 bows and on your right hand you have 3. Okay, so create a corridor with B and C. A is free. A goes and grabs C. It grabs C on the right hand, not A. Okay. Unreversed, so straight across. And then pull out and pull out. Migrate on the left hand, B to C, A to B.
Oh, B to C. Yeah, I got that.
And we tighten. Okay. And now we repeat on the right hand, create your corridor. A on the right hand grabs C left. It comes back out. Then B comes back out. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Yeah, I haven't heard your shot. 1 second. That's back in my hand.
Okay. Yeah, it happens. And then we migrate B to C on the left and A to B on the left. And we tighten.
Yeah.
And on the left, we create our corridor. A goes through and grabs C straight across, unreversed. A comes out. B comes out. On the left, or excuse me, on the right, B to C, A to B. And we tighten.
Yeah.
And now on the right, create your corridor. A goes through to grab C left. It comes out. A comes out rather. B comes out. On the left, we migrate down. B to C, A to B, and we tighten. On the left, create a corridor. A goes through, grabs C right, unreversed straight across. A comes out, B comes out. On the right, B to C, A to B, and we tighten. So hopefully at this point, you should start seeing 2 separate braids forming. I'm curious, is anyone out there in the live stream actually following along, actually doing this, or are you all just watching the hilarity ensue?
Well, Yuki's doing it, and Yuki's almost finished.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Well, you've got a good chunk of it. I'm like, well, how are you starting it like a machine? She's just a machine going bum 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 bum. Oh yeah, I suppose you're just walking machine. I'm getting confused looking at you. You're just like bum 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 bum.
Okay, so on A, on right hand, hopefully. Are you a 2 on the right, 3 on the left?
Yeah,
okay, create your corridor on the right. Finger A goes through, grabs C left, so the bottom loop left, unreversed. A comes out, B comes out, and then on the left, C to B to C, A to B, and we tighten. And now on the right, on the left, we create our corridor. A goes through, grabs C unreversed, A comes out, B comes out. On the right, C to B, B to C, A to B. A is now free on the right, and we tighten. Is that feeling any better?
Oh, it's way better now. What am I doing? Oh yeah, no, I was right the first time. There.
Do you need continued vocal guidance, or are you good?
No, I'm good. I just need to think about what I'm doing. What am I doing with my life? I mean, this is great.
I will tell you that Fingerloop braiding has the danger of sending you into a philosophically Zen space. So yeah, it can definitely have that effect.
What do you mean? I have that effect like all the time in living history. Why am I in this outfit? Why am I with these people? Why am I drinking this alcohol in a fire in the middle of a field?
Why does the sky seem blue? Why do cats like string?
Well, Rachel, I wouldn't say I'd be taking that kind of stuff out of living history event.
Yeah, I will. So for those of you who might be interested in making really long laces, there's a couple of ways you can do that. One, you can use your legs and feet, which I've demonstrated in a couple of my live stream medieval sewing parties. What I call the finger loop Pilates experience, because basically or even yoga, I don't know, finger loop yoga maybe? Yeah, basically you end up like using your leg and foot to actually tamp down the pattern, right? The other option is actually to have two people and have a really, really long bows. And one person is at the end with the anchor, usually some kind of wooden spoon or something. And they actually are the person who tightens the pattern. Because right now we're tightening the pattern by opening our arms, and using the pressure from our hands. But if you want loops that are longer than your wingspan, then you need something else to tighten down the pattern, so that when it's really long, the person tightening down the pattern is player number 2. So those are your two options for really long loops: either longer with your foot and toes, or really, really long with player 2. And as I was saying, on average, you lose about 20% of your length depending on the braid. So, if you want your loops to be 30 centimeters, then you should probably start off with like 37 centimeters or something like that. So Philip, do you have any progress? Do you see any
We've got the braid going, but the anchor looks amazing. I think the anchor is even more beautiful than it was a few hours ago. What was it? An hour ago?
Okay, so let me see if I can see what's happening and troubleshoot.
That's good. Like, don't get me wrong, the braid itself is good, but the anchor's extra gorgeous.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to. So, okay, but do you have braids? Is I guess my point.
Yeah. There's a braid appearing, but Yuki's braid, like, what the hell? What do you mean? Yuki's almost like good halfway into it, like, and she did a big one. Like, I've got like a midget one, and I haven't even got as far as Yuki. Like,
the question. So, crepe. Oh God, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. A crepe belt. How is that pronounced? CREIC.
Are you talking about the belt that goes on the gallows glass and fishermen? Do you remember the?
Is that what that is? The fisherman's belt?
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. Rachel, this is the belt is this the belt that goes on the fisherman and the gallows glass?
I mean, from what I've heard about it, this would make a lot of sense. Why? Yeah. So the reason is, you'll notice it's low tech, right? We need minimal. In fact, the only thing you need in terms of tools is a pair of scissors, because you can tie it off to your toe. Right. So you don't even need a tree or something like that. So this is absolutely, I could see fishermen making this themselves. Absolutely. It would be super easy. I mean, yeah, their wives could do it as well. But, there's a lot of a lot of handcrafts that are now associated with women's work weren't women's work in the Middle Ages and in ancient history. So yeah, I could totally see there's a couple of braids in here that would be really good candidates. This particular one is like the split braid, not so much, but you know, there are definitely some good options in this book. There's a lot of two-person braids actually that would make a chevron effect, for instance, and that could make a really wide thing, especially if you're using a wider yarn. So I could, yeah, absolutely, I could see this as an option for that. It's too bad that none of them have survived, I don't think, from the Middle Ages. So it's conjectural, right? But still,
I think we have the modern ones though, don't we, Yuki? The ones from the 1960s. Yeah, because weren't they still wearing them in the 1960s, the fishermen?
I think so. Aren't they core knitted, like actual knitting? No?
Are they knitted?
Rather than woven like this.
Yeah, they could be. Oh, you've already finished yours, have you?
I haven't.
Yuki, now you have to make more loops. We're going to do a different braid here in a moment. Okay, so Philip, how roughly how much have you gotten along? How much braid have you done?
I'm
well, no,
getting there.
because actually, are you feeling comfortable with this? Because if you're comfortable with this, we're going to take it to the next level and change one thing up to change the kind of braid.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so let me see. I'm going to try to get my. Just going to get it so that the colors are all there. We go. Okay. Just to make it visually easy on you. You don't have to do what I just did. I just got my loops so that it's once more like, you know, red and yellow evenly divided. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, by changing just one tweak, we're going to take what's now two separate braids and we're going to join them together. So now we're going to, when we create our corridor, on the left hand, when we're pulling from the left hand, we're going to go reversed. So we create our corridor on the right. Finger A goes through and takes loop C by grabbing the back of the bottom loop, of the bottom half of the loop, right? We're reversing it. And then A pulls out, B pulls out, and then we migrate B to C on left, in my case left, and A to B, whatever is your two loop hand. Okay. Now on this hand, we're going to grab unreversed. So on the other hand, we will always grab unreversed. So you have to pay attention a little bit here because it's going to create a different braid. So we create a corridor, finger A goes through, and this time we grab unreversed like we had been doing before. A comes out, B comes out. On the other hand, B migrates to C, A migrates to B, and we tighten. Okay, so now you have to remember the pattern reversed and unreversed. So we're back to reversed. Create a corridor, finger A goes through, grab C reversed, meaning the back of the bottom of the loop. A comes out, B comes out, B to C, A to B. And we tighten. And we tighten. Okay. Create a corridor, A goes through, and this time we grab unreversed. A comes out, B comes out, B to C, A to B on the other hand, and we tighten. Create our corridor, this time it's reversed. A grabs C reverse, so back of the bottom loop. A comes out, B comes out, B to C, A to B, and we tighten. And you should already be able to see that the two braids have now connected. Create our corridor. This time it's unreversed. A comes out, B comes out, and we migrate, and we tighten. This time reversed. A comes out, B comes out, we migrate, and we tighten. How's that going, Philip?
Great. I'm doing great.
Fantastic. And keep going.
Yuki, do you know Japanese finger braiding? Rachel was asking about Japanese finger braiding.
There are ones, the ones that use the tablets and stuff. As in,
Yeah.
like there's this.
Do you know how to do
Yeah.
that?
That's the modern version. So back in the Middle Ages, Yuki, they were apparently doing this kind of finger loop
That's
braiding.
what we can do.
Yeah.
Back.
Yeah, can we?
I don't know if we have the tools or not. We need
Is there anyone we can get in
dials and
contact
stuff.
with? Because that'd be good for YouTube. Like,
Yeah.
now you should think about it. Yeah, we'll see. Especially when Rachel's stuff. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Because your mom might know or someone. I don't know. Meanwhile, in the comment section, did I hear someone say Gallo Glass had belts? Yes, Gallo Glass had belts. They were using the same belts that the fishermen were using, because the Gallo Glass and fishermen have a very close link together because of their connection with the whole Viking past of many Gallo Glass having a Hiberno-Scandinavian foundation. A lot of the Gallo Glass, they're, I suppose, ancestors from like 800 AD were
Right.
both of the Scandinavian world and of the Irish world, because most of them came from like Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Limerick, and
Right.
another load of them came from like the Orkney Islands and places like that. So they had a close link with the fishermen, right? And so when they went onto the battlefield, the professional soldiers who come from these fishermen villages and stuff, to tell the difference between Gallo Glasses of different clans going into the late medieval period, they would wear fisherman belt. So where we have this understanding that they told, from a modern perspective, a lot of people think Gallo Glasses wore, kilts. That's how modern people see what Gallo Glasses wear. They didn't actually wear kilts in the battle. What they actually wore to tell the difference between the different clans were fishermen's belts. That's how they told the difference between the different clans.
Yeah, there's, the problem is a lot of people look at sculpture and they don't understand how medieval sculpture works. And so, and the way in which just sort of naturally occurring folds in garments were depicted. So they look at a lot of, they look at a lot of sculptures in Scotland and Ireland, and they want to see kilts. So they see kilts.
Yeah.
But those aren't kilts. Those are just tunics in layers that have either been belted or not. But the sculptor is trying to depict the folds in a really full tunic, the way they would fall when the fullness of the tunic falls straight, then those folds naturally form. Those aren't pleats. They're just the folds in the garment.
It's
right.
very
So
true.
that's created a lot of unfortunate misinterpretation. It's like when people look at clouds in the sky and they see a pattern and no one else sees the pattern. Same idea.
That's amazing. No, don't get me wrong. I like going after tartan. You've seen that as well, Rachel. Anytime there's tartan, it's like, we can use that for a little bit of propaganda.
Right.
Like at Ren fairs and stuff. Because the thing is when you go to medieval events and stuff, you want people to know you're Irish or Scottish. So you try to go after stuff that, be able to fit with the public. So you're not spending your whole time explaining, hey, look, I'm not actually a part of Lord of the Rings. I'm actually an early medieval, knight or Gallo Glass or whatever you're trying to depict. But at the same time, you still want to be historically accurate,
Yeah. Yeah, it's about educating. It's about changing what people perceive to be medieval Irish or medieval Scottish, or and to understand that humans are humans and they like different things. So what someone in 13th century Scotland was wearing is not what someone in 15th century Scotland was wearing. They just weren't.
Yes. Yeah.
They just weren't.
The people do imagine that as well, because the Gallo Glass first appeared in the 13th century. The Gallo Glass we know today. Before then, they were just, a part of the Hiberno-Scandinavian community, and they were referred to as Oostmen. So they're not officially referred to Gallo Glass until we get up to the 13th century, when they are mercenaries, the likes of the O'Neills and the O'Connors, right? So they appear in the 13th century, and that same word obviously is applying to their next group of ancestors and stuff to the 15th century. The difference being, the first major difference being, is first off, in the 13th century, they were more like warband mercenaries. But by the time we get up to the 15th and 16th century, they're Gaelic companies now. They have administration, they have more organization, they have far more advanced tactics. Like, it's a completely different group. But yet, when I talk to people, they assume, like, people literally turn around and say, hey, wait, gallo glass, wouldn't they be outdated by the time we get to the 15th and 16th century? And that's true if you're thinking about gallo glass of the 13th century, which they would be. Like, war bands would be way outdated by then. But you're not, we're not talking about war bands by the time we get up to the 15th, 16th century. We're talking about organized Gaelic mercenary companies.
Yeah, they're companies. I mean, and I think people, it's funny, people have this really romantic view of mercenaries in general. And I don't mean romantic like, oh, they're so sexy. I mean, like, what they imagine them to be, like, free, untethered, no honor, answering only to themselves. Then it's like, no, these are highly organized businesses that have a very strict hierarchy that is observed, and I mean observed at the risk of a lash. And that's true all across Europe. That's not, because otherwise you cannot possibly be an effective force in 15th century warfare if it's just a bunch of literal freelancers running around doing whatever they please.
Yeah.
That's just not the way mercenary companies worked. And especially in the living history community, there's a real attraction amongst what would modernly be punks, basically, of the punk movement, the kind of people who don't want to answer to authority and who don't want to have to bow down to hierarchy. They get attracted to mercenary companies in particular because they think it's their chance to stick it to the man. And I'm like, dude, the man is your company head.
Yeah. This is the mad thing, is that companies had reputation. And because they had a reputation, so gallo glasses in the 13th century, there's a good chance that they would have, if given the chance, probably would have ran off to save their skin. Companies in the 15th and 16th century, once they were hired on the contract, because of they were representing the company, a lot of gallo glass would fight to the death. Like, the moment they were being surrounded, they would continue fighting because they didn't want to give a bad name to the company,
Right.
The honors to the company was worth so much to them, because what would happen if they survived and went back to the company would punish them,
Yeah.
because it's the honor of the company. Like, and people forget that. Like, I see people online and they compare a lot of these European companies to the samurais. And I think and that's because of the idea of company, people who are representing the companies fighting to the death. And I think the honor system in both Japan, to be honest with you, I don't want to be offensive to Yuki, I just don't understand it. I don't understand why a samurai would fight to the death, but I understand why a person in a company would fight to the death, because they don't want to go back to their own company and be bullied, basically.
Right. Yeah, it's but it's funny because the Italian companies, mercenary companies, led by the great Condottieri, they also operated entirely on reputation, and no one would hire them if they were known to shirk their contracts, right? If they were known to run away. But here's the other unknown thing about the Italian companies, and I kind of suspect it was this case throughout most of Europe. The goal, mercenaries' goal was to actually minimize the amount of death on the battlefield, because no one actually wanted to die for their job, right?
Well,
they wanted to live to fight another day and get paid and enjoy getting paid. So, the everyone talks about, oh, the Italian wars, how brutal they were. And I'm like, they don't get brutal and really brutal until Cesare Borgia comes along. But before that, it was a lot more of a sort of gentleman's meet and greet with some weapons action, because no one wanted to die. And trained men at arms are expensive. Like, you can't just go and pick some peasant up and say, here's a spear boy, go get him. Like, that's not how 15th century combat works. So, I'm assuming that there must be a similar situation in the gallo glass companies where they're not looking to be a meat grinder, right? That's not good business.
It's so interesting that you highlight that, because it's not until the Tudor conquest that we have gallo glasses in situations where they have to hold the line while the nobles escape. Before then, it was exactly what you said there, where it was a case of, two gallo glasses would meet up, they have a bit of banter with the cattle, one side ends up getting the cattle, and that's that. What's happening in the Tudor conquest is the Tudors are trying to kill Irish nobles. So the gallo glasses have to hold the line, and sometimes they're getting surrounded, and the nobles aren't off the field yet. And because of the reputation of their contracts, they're still holding the line. Their job is to make sure that Irish noble is escaping the battlefield. That's what's happening there. So it's so interesting that you highlighted, you know, that particular name that's so famous in Italy, like.
Right. It's like, you know, it's funny when I've read that, it's sort of like the gladiators, right? Like everyone assumes, oh, gladiators are dying all the time on, you know, it's like, it's a show, it's show fighting. The purpose, these are highly trained, expensive professional performers. You don't just kill them every day because it's going to take a while to train up the replacements.
Mm.
So, you know, it is interesting that in the 16th century, it took that turn. And yet I suspect that the mercenary companies were still probably doing everything in their power to not just be slaughtered, you know?
Yeah.
And
they went to the fight the other day, the next day, like, it's bang on right, but at the same time, they did still have that reputation that they needed to protect. I did have another point, and I just want to pass my bloody head.
Yeah, always glad I live now. Yeah, Wayne. I mean, you know, so people always ask me, Contessa, would you like to go and live in the 15th century? No, I would
not the 15th.
like to live in the 15th century. There are many things I love about the 15th century that I think would serve us well today. You know, their idea of sustainable living, circular economy, the interacting with each other, like dancing together, playing games together, face to face with our hands, not on a screen. Ironic because we're live streaming, but whatever. You know, there's a lot of aspects of 15th century life that I think we could learn from and bear repeating. There's a lot, though.
Yeah, it's the battlefields which get a bit too out of hand, especially in the 16th century, and then we have the 17th century.
Oh yeah, God! Oh God! You know, There's a reason there aren't actually many people doing 17th century reenactment beyond English Civil War, and the English Civil War thing is like, well, that's our own homebred Civil War. We should reenact it. But like, there's very few people doing 30 years war reenactment. There's some. But it's not super popular.
You have the choice to either do the bland, boring 13th century, no offense to everybody, or you can do the period of the Lanzknecht, and it's like Maximilian, 30th, you know, what was it, the 30 Years' War? Which you're gonna pick? You know, Maximilian's armor is absolutely gorgeous. Like the armor of the Holy Roman Empire is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Max, did you get to see the Last Night exhibit that traveled? I think it traveled the world. It maybe was just the US, but I think it was a world exhibit.
I've seen it on YouTube. I've seen it on YouTube. Sadly, I missed it. Myself and Yuki only seen it after it popped up on YouTube. And then, do you remember that the Last Night exhibit on YouTube with Maximilian's armor? The two of us watched it. Yeah, that's the one. And it was, this was it 2015 or something, and we could have seen it, but we didn't know it was on. Yeah.
Oh my God, you missed it? You missed it? Oh my God, I got to see it twice. So we were actually on a cruise on Queen Mary 2, crossing from Southampton to New York and then going down to the Caribbean and coming back. So we got to see it, and I didn't know about it. We just went to the Met because the Met's my favorite museum in the world. And lo and behold, the Last Night exhibit, oh my God, just jaw-dropping things all collected in this one space. So much knowledge. And then when we come back from the Caribbean and disembarked, we got to go a second time. So I got to see it twice.
But they were highlighting how Maximilian's armor was like space age armor.
It was space age.
Oh
my God.
I say that like this like Maximilian's armor always angers English armor. Like we're probably going to get a load of hate for this, but there's a lot of people online that really defend Henry VIII's armor, and you just look at Henry VIII's armor and you look at Maximilian's armor, and it's like, okay, I don't need to say anything else.
The artistry of Maximilian's armor is, and I mean this literally, breathtaking. Like I gasped when I saw his splendid, his battlefield armor, like that he did. You could tell it was beautiful and gilt and all that. It was still worn on the field of battle. You saw, it was easy to see the damage it had taken. And I went to the Leeds Royal Armory and saw Henry VIII's 2 suits from the Field of Cloth of Gold. And I will grant you that the technology of the lames on the backs of his knees and in his groin and on the backs of his on the insides of his elbows, that was some pretty next level shit, because he didn't need mail. Like he didn't. Normally with harness, you need to wear mail to protect the spots where the plate can't cover. But this armor managed to figure out how to cover everything and for him to still move. And the thing that was funny at the Leeds Royal Armory, they actually said that this was the armor that was made for the Field of Cloth of Gold, but Henry didn't get to wear it because Francis looked at it and said, "There is no way I can score a point on you. You have no weak spots on this armor." Like the only way he could have actually won in the deed of arms in the foot combat was literally by throwing Henry to the ground, because there were no points of vulnerability anywhere. So that's why they had to go and wrestle up that other suit of armor that he actually, the other harness they actually ended up wearing, the one with the big skirt. Right, that was like this last minute thing to give him something that Francis would accept. So I mean, from that perspective, it's pretty advanced, but the artistry on Maximilian's is
But they even were looking at the the shield that takes the impact of
the exploding shields. Yeah. Those things are fun. So fun.
They were saying the level of science on that was incredible. That Maximilian understood car mechanics, the car crash of a car, even way before the invention of a car. Like the Maximilian understood how when you make an impact, if you have something to, as you said there, explode or take the impact of the shocked.
Right.
But they were starting to cop on to shock impact from the coming to the end of the Romans. When the Rome was starting to collapse, they started making adjustments to the helmet to understand, the classic case of CTE. So they were, during the medieval period, starting to understand the science of CTE and the shock of impact. But Maximilian was taking that science and was bringing it to a next level. And I was listening to the YouTube video of that. And Maximilian would have people studying armor at each event to study the impact of two, knights smashing against each other during the tournaments and stuff, which came in very handy with the study of mechanics of what's happening on the battlefield and stuff when they went into the Italian wars and stuff. And that's why the Holy Roman Empire was going into, like, when Charles V had taken over, it was getting proper into the space age study and physics and stuff. But what's interesting about Charles V is he was taking a lot of stuff and restudying the stuff that Maximilian, his own grandfather, was studying and applying it back into the Italian wars again. That's how switched on Maximilian and his team was like.
Well, I mean, Charles grew up in his grandfather's court, so that completely tracks. That family had a very interesting. I mean, he grew up. Charles V actually also grew up in Margaret of York's court, and the Grande Dame herself, right? So he actually the diabolical Duchess, I think Henry VII called her, right? He also grew up. She actually helped raise. That was her great great grandson. Like she helped raise him. That's kind of that's always a little weird to me. Like this, you would say Charles V is a quintessential Renaissance prince, right? Like he's basically past the Middle Ages. It's the Reformation has come into play. That's kind of the world that he's in. And yet he knew and was raised in part by Margaret of York, who's like this quintessential medieval princess, right? So to me, that's always an interesting connection of those two worlds. Because when he was a child, it was kind of the dying gasp of chivalric combat, I would say, really, when Charles V was a little boy, right? So he got to see kind of, I mean, there's a reason they called Maximilian the last knight. And I kind of almost agree with that assessment of him.
Oh, I definitely do. Yeah.
Because Henry played at it, right? Francis played at it. But I think, to me, they were play acting medieval chivalry at that point. Whereas Maximilian was still in the world where it was still a lived thing.
Exactly, because you can see that one of the greatest examples is his opening campaign when he went to save his first wife. Do you remember she wrote that letter to Maximilian requesting that he would go and save her? And the fact
Mary
that
of Burgundy.
Yeah, the fact he put on that armor and went into battle dismounted to show that and managed to win that battle and then
Yeah,
win her shows that he was the last knight. He's the last example of that world.
it
Like
really is.
during the High Middle Ages, I was even talking to that today where we're trying to find and I'll see what my comment section is like later. I was, asking to, define what is the Irish knights in the High Middle Ages, because you have the Norman knights come in, but the problem is straight away when the top Norman knight was William Marshall, and what an example of what is a
Right.
knight, during the medieval period. And the thing is, if you read Isabel, was it Tristan and Isabel, which gives us a feeling, what's that? Isolde and Tristan, which is written in the 12th century, isn't it? The 12th
Yeah,
century version. I know there's
there is, I think there's an 11th century like Welsh version, but yeah, the most version that people know is 12th century. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. So the 12th century one is the one that I'm assuming William Marshall would have gone after, which is the
Right.
one with the Irish princess. And he marries an Irish princess, which is Isabel de Clare.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
Isabel de Clare herself is such an amazing and interesting woman because she takes over the administration at Kilkenny and New Ross and pretty much runs Ireland when the likes of the Gaelic nobles are pushed to the side, the Gaelic male nobles are pushed to the side.
Right.
And then you have the Norman knights. Well, this is why I was saying, what do you define the knights that are in Ireland at the time? Because we refer to them as Norman knights. And this is where it gets funny, because William Marshall, who in Irish history books is recognized as a Norman knight, goes back to France to fight actual Normans in Normandy, do you know?
Right.
And that's why it's just funny when I look at the Irish history books, I'm like, wait, you have Normans in Ireland going back to France to fight actual Normans in Normandy. And I'm the only one turning around and saying this modern definition is just kind of strange.
It doesn't work, right? I mean, it's always, modern historians are always looking to categorize things and put them in neat boxes. And I don't blame historians for that. Like, I mean, I try to do it too. But then if you really think about any given part of history, most things don't fit in a neat box that's defined and wrapped up with a bow. Like the Middle Ages versus the Renaissance is, where does one cleanly end and the other cleanly begin? You can't find that point.
Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't mind the definition of the Normans invading Ireland in 1169 and 1171 because it defines and finishes off that whole kind of chapter of Norman conquests going from Normandy
from William the
to
Conqueror
England.
onward. Right.
Which makes perfect sense. And I'd say it makes sense because it aligns Ireland back into the High Middle Ages with the Norman conquests that are going on in the Middle East, Ireland, England, etc. Right? So it's important to have that definition in there so it aligns. But the problem is when you continue using that definition, when you have knights in Ireland fighting, and they spend the entire, now that Ireland is back into the connection of Europe, they're then fighting Normans constantly, like actual Normans. But our Irish history books just have it as France or England because it's happening over there. And Irish history books are concentrated in the fighting between the Lordship of Ireland and the native Gaelic people because that's the Irish nationalist interpretation, which, don't get me wrong, that's important when you go over to like 1916 and modern nationalism that's going on. But when you're looking at just the Irish medieval history, you're going to be tripping over a lot. Especially when you go from 1214 onwards and you have Normans fighting Normans in Normandy, do you know?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it's like, you have to think to yourself, well, what is the point at which even the Normans stop thinking of themselves that way? When did they stop viewing themselves as Normans and start viewing themselves as English or Irish or something else?
But this is the thing, is that the first lot of Normans that go into Ireland, which we refer to in Irish history books as Cambro Normans, at the time they were actually referring to themselves as the Welsh Marsh Knights, the Knights of the Welsh Marshes, right? That's how they were actually defining themselves at the time. And somebody in the comments section even said that as a joke. Oh, well, technically, they're actually the Welsh Marsh Knights, which they are. They're the Knights of the Welsh Marshes. And the knights, the second wave, which is the Anglo-Normans, they were defining themselves as English knights, not because they were born in England or anything like that. It's because they were loyal to the English crown, right? So the
Right.
second wave, technically speaking, was defining itself as English knights because they were loyal to Henry II at that specific time. It's funny because definitions do change, because you're talking 1 minute, you're talking about like the early 12th century, then you're jumping ahead to the 13th century. It would be
Right.
exactly like somebody defining themselves as Irish in what was it, the First World War, which is Irish British, because you had people who were fighting in the trenches in World War One who were defining themselves as both British and Irish. But then suddenly, click like that, a bunch of events happen, and we
Right.
would 100% never look at ourselves as British because of the attacks from the likes of the Black and Tans shooting innocent Irish people, which caused, even if you were loyalists before, if you had, like, for instance, my mother's side of the family, who was killed by a member of the Black and Tan, or deleted as the internet likes to call it.
Jesus.
I know, right?
Deleted.
They
Oh,
would, even if they were somewhat pro to the government, they were now insanely anti-government. That is literally the equivalent of, let's say, if there's a big massive war, and then the American government is like, okay, we have a load of unemployed soldiers. They all need to become police officers now. We're not going to give them full training, and we're not going to assess how sane they are. We're just going to send them straight into the field, right? So they
right.
go straight out to do their work. And guess what? They start doing all kinds of mad stuff. And that's what happened in Ireland after the First World War. And they were the Black and Tans. And so everybody very, very quickly became anti-British establishment. And there's no way after that would they ever refer to themselves as being British ever again. So the definition of what a person is does change over time. And that's the same thing between the events of, what was it, 1169, when you've got people who refer to themselves as Knights of the Welsh Marches, and then suddenly you've got events that are happening over in France, where you've got knights who are loyal to William Marshall and William Marshall alone, because there's, all that funny stuff to do with King John, and then there's all that funny stuff to do with the king over in France. So suddenly people are loyal to just William Marshall and what William Marshall is trying to do to improve his status in society. Are you looking at my one?
No.
What are you up there?
Yeah. So I have a question. You dropped your loops. Were you done, or did you just drop them because you couldn't talk and do the thing at the same time?
Oh, my one's, well, this is my one, right? And Yuki's just tied my one, or her one. So this is
Hey,
Yuki's
no,
one,
bad
which is
kitty. No, God damn it, the cat awoke. No. So here's, ladies and gentlemen, this is why you can't let cats have string, because they will eat it like spaghetti, and then they will either get sausage poos, which is bad enough because it chases them, or it gets tangled up in their intestines, and then you have to take them for surgery. So don't let your cats eat string, everyone. I know it's cute. Don't do it. No, go back to sleep. Why are you awake? Okay, well, if you want to be on TV, here you go. There's my little Nobby. There she is. There's the little baby. She's the little baby we rescued last year. Her mother abandoned her at about 4 weeks old and just stopped taking care of her. Yeah, she had a sister. The sister didn't make it. We took the sister,
no.
spent like 300,000 won at the vet trying to save the little sister. She was too far gone, but Nobby was not too far gone. And now she's an ornery little baby, aren't you? Yes. Go back to sleep. I'm working with yarn. Okay, so how's your thing?
Right, so that's my one. As beautiful as, I think I messed up probably that one. That's probably one where I got confused. But regardless, that's my one, and that's Yuki's one.
Looks good. Oh, Yuki tied you up. Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, yeah, that's what she does. That's definitely the Japanese in you for sure.
What do you mean?
Just joking about how you tied me up.
Thank you, Pepper. I do have she has her own YouTube channel. She and her brothers, Kitties of the Palace. That's an affiliate channel. It's just all cats all the time, just them being ornery and mostly sleeping because they sleep a lot. But I don't even know. She found something else to chew on that she probably shouldn't be chewing on. So how did that go? How does that feel compared to your first? I didn't realize you'd done finger loop braiding before. So
years back though, so it was great to go back over it, to be quite honest with you. Maybe I should do anchoring better next time. Maybe I should go look up different techniques of anchoring. My anchor's amazing though, Yuki, isn't it? No comment from Yuki. Can you hear her laughing?
Oh my God. Oh my God. So the second braid we made should actually, if you go and kind of, I'll see if I can, I'll do this and I'll show you. You can actually manipulate it open. So the first braid should be basically two like this, right? And then the last bit that we did where you were grabbing one reversed should actually be flat and open like this.
I got that.
Not on you. Yuki finished before we got to that point, I think. Didn't you, Yuki? You finished before we got to the point of joining the two braids, right?
Yeah, Yuki's well done. Yuki's tied me up and all, like.
So does your braid also have? Did you also manage to do the flat thing?
Maybe. Yeah, yeah. So I don't have the flat one, no.
Yeah.
No.
Mine's like a squarish one.
Yuki's got a squarish one. So Yuki's got a square going on. I have
So the square is what happens if you reverse on all sides. Yeah. So the square happens. And tie this. So the square happens because I did a square one. The square one happens if you do reversed on both sides. Right. So that's what happens if you reverse on both sides. And then if you don't reverse at all, you end up with three bow braids basically. And then if you only reverse on the one side, you end up with a flat braid like this.
So I got flat braid. So I only reversed on one side, is it?
Yeah, you didn't end up with two braid. It looks like you have a square braid.
Sure. We were meant to change that on one way, were we?
Yeah, you were supposed to grab unreversed. That's okay.
Well, I just had fun anyway. That's the main thing.
That's the main thing. And you made something. I mean, it braided. It's a thing. It's together.
Yeah.
Your loops are together.
Maybe I can't tie it around me, for the next fisherman trip. But
you might.
Well, yeah,
you might
just
need
a wee bit of weight.
You might need a little bit more for that. You need this braid, which is actually also five. Believe it or not, five bows, but just a thicker yarn and a slightly different technique.
Oh, nice.
So it's crazy how all of these are examples of 5 bows, but they're all they're so different, right? You just change one little thing about the technique, and it creates a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Let me see. Where's the overlay? Where did my overlays go? Overlays. Is that the overlay? Nope, those are not overlays. Those are the overlays. There we go. Let me get rid of this the above view. We don't need the above view anymore. Or not. Guess I don't get to get rid of the above view. Remove. Yes, participant hidden. Awesome. Okay. Technology for the win. Yeah, oh my goodness. So Yuki, you've already mastered the 5 bow. You're ready for the 12 bow with 46 steps per centimeter. That's actually what I teach in my advanced finger loop braiding classes. So yeah. Now where did our comments go? Okay, so where did I unfortunately, this is so annoying. Oh, there it is. Oh, good to know. I will have a look. Do you know what that was in response to, Philip?
No, I just seen the comment. I'm being all slow here.
Pepper.
I seen it a while back, and I was like, "What were we talking about again?"
Pepper, I'm so sorry. The comments sometimes are delayed. What was good to know? I will have a look at what, or I guess you answered. So it was something we must have said. Oh my God, what is that?
Yeah.
What on earth is that? Is that showing up? Good to know. This is really fascinating. Always glad. Okay, well, are there any questions about finger loop braiding? Anyone? Wait, why? No, new comments shouldn't display there. Bad. No. Okay. That is definitely not. Oh, the cat channel. Okay, yeah. Kitties of the Palace for all Contessa cats all the time. And I even have travel kitties on the Cat Palace Kitties channel. So yeah. And it's called that because these kitties really rule this roost. I'm just a kitty servitor, really. That's all I am. Do you have any pets, Philip? Do you have any babies? Any little fur babies?
We have doggies at home, but our 2 other doggies passed away while we were in Japan, and Mom's got a bunch of new dogs now, who Mom keeps showing me off to, but I haven't met them yet, so I don't know what their reaction is going to be when they see us 2 come home. But the only one we still have is, what breed is Winnie again? The small little cute black one. I can't remember what Winnie is. But the only one we know that still would know us is Winnie, and she's like a tiny little hairy black one, and she's so beautiful. But she's a very old dog now. But God, and she's the quiet one that's like super protective. So for most people, she's like really friendly. But see if she doesn't like you, or feels that the family wouldn't like you, ooh, she'll like get proper defensive, like. But she's lost her teeth. Her teeth's fallen out from biting stuff. Yeah, because she used to get proper aggressive and bite things. So now she'll just come over and nibble instead.
You have been gummed.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. So she'll give you like 1 or 2 warning barks, and then she'll like, if you're backing away, she'll continue growling. But if you don't, then she'll just start biting away. Unlike she always loved you though.
She?
Yeah, I don't.
Got bitten or anything.
Yeah. She never barked at you or anything. Like, yeah. No, she's lost teeth from biting. Yeah.
Oh.
And her gums, when she bites in, you can see a big chunk of the gum missing and all. Like, because she bites in so hard, like because she's going in to get victims. Like, she's defending the whole. Poor doggy. She's so good though. She's so good.
I always say small dogs have a small dog syndrome, which means they're like extra fierce and extra aggressive because they have to be. Whereas big dogs know they're big and don't really generally feel the need to express dominance because they just know that they can sit on that little dog at any given moment. Yeah.
Very true.
I am sadly not a dog person because I was attacked brutally by a German Shepherd when I was 8 and I had a chunk torn out of my arm. It was terrifying. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So I don't hate dogs and I'm not afraid of them. I just don't feel a particular affinity for them. Specific dogs I can feel affection for, like if I get to know the dog, but in general my inclination is towards cats, whereas dogs, like, okay, they smell bad. They don't bathe themselves. You have to take them out and walk them.
Yeah. No, I love dogs because the moment they're all like protective, that's it. They will protect you to the end of their life. And even the fact that if you were to pass away before the poor doggy will go to your gravesite and just cry all the time. You see, that's why I love dogs. Or a cat will probably just
no. The cat will eat you. Let me be. I have no illusions, right? I have no illusions about cats and their loyalty. They are loyal to people, but also if you're dead, they will eat you. So,
But that could be a deeper love. I was reading about, what was it? Not just reading. I was watching YouTube videos and everything. People are studying medieval period and cannibalism. I think it's Shakespeare. There's some literature anyway about, I think it's a mother whose child is killed. I don't know if it's Shakespeare's work or someone else's work during the medieval Renaissance period, but they have cannibalism going on where the mother just eats the children. And what's that? Is it Anderson?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Titus Andronicus has a wonderful scene in which the mother is served her sons unknown. Mind you, it's a punishment for her. Her sons have been killed, and she's terrible, and they're terrible. They all deserve to die. Like, I have no sympathy for these people. But yeah, she's at the final feast, the grand denouement. She has served her sons at the feast, and she's not told until she's chomped down and enjoyed. So yeah, I mean, it is a thing that comes up in some of the more horrifying stories that are told in.
So there's somebody did a good bit of work. It's a few people now have done work on cannibalism during the medieval period, that it's meant to be a deep form of affection. that I literally want to embody the person. Not my words, by the way. Other people's words and
I mean,
words. I'm not going to go around eating
I know
anyone.
there are cultures where that historically ancient cultures where that's been a practice. I wasn't aware of it in any, but I mean, I guess it depends on medieval period where, right? The Middle Ages is not a monolith. Europe is not a monolith. Were they talking about someplace in like early medieval Europe, or were they talking someplace in the steppes, or?
Well, the ones I was reading about was just kind of broad medieval literature, because I think after that, then we go into the 17th century where there's a lack of food, and then we suddenly have a ton of cannibal literature that pops up in the 17th century. I think it's the Brothers Grimm and everything pops up in the 17th century, don't they?
They're early
remember.
they're late 18th, early 19th century. So, and the
Oh,
17th
right.
century is really the lean century, because the 30 Years' War just
Mm,
and a combination of really horrific events. You know, there's the 30 Years' War, there's the English Civil War, there's the Glorious Revolution in quotes. There's some other dynastic shit happening in mainland Europe beyond the 30 Years' War at that time. So the 17th century is just a gruesome period for Europe in general. So there's a lot of famine. So I could definitely see that that would be
because
that. And then the Brothers Grimm are collecting their stories kind of the early
oh,
19th
that was it.
century.
Yeah,
So it would make like Hansel and
yeah.
Gretel is about cannibals, right? Like that's a
That's
tale
it.
of
That's the one I was
cannibalism.
using, and there's a few other ones.
So it
Yeah,
absolutely
but
makes sense that that would have arisen in,
yeah,
especially in the wake of the horror that was really the 30 Years' War, where I'm certain there were families leaving their children to die and or to be eaten, like selling them to be, you know, the next meal.
yeah. Oh, as horrible as it was, yeah. Because even in Ireland, that's the point where you start to see cannibalism. So from the 17th century all the way up to the 20th century, because of this constant fighting with the British, that's where you start to get cannibalism literature popping up in Ireland. And then you go over to, I think it's Northern Germany, Poland, and Russia, that whole place there. And you've got a lot of cannibal witch stories appearing there, because you also have there's a Polish version of the Wicked Witch and stuff. I can't remember specifically her name, but she's all about grinding up
Oh, Baba
the
Yaga, you
meat and
mean?
everything. That's the one. A lot of her literature, the later you go into the 17th and 18th century and stuff, and they can tell that the foundation of the folklore is clearly from like early medieval, probably earlier than that. But it seems to be that the description of the cannibalism gets more and more descriptive with the language. That there's a change of the language,
Right.
and it seems to get more kind of gritty, kind of cannibalistic. The later the years go up,
Right.
which could be highlighting the fact of lack of food.
Right.
And it seems to be an area around northern Germany, Poland, and also up around the Russian areas and stuff, where there's a lot of kind of cannibal, kind of witch folklore appearing around that period between the 17th century all the way up to the 20th century, even up to World War II and stuff. And which could explain why, in particular, Hansel and Gretel got so popular.
Right. Well, I mean, that completely tracks. So, you know, historically, cannibalism is usually, anyway, associated with a society under stress. Right. For instance, in the going back to the second millennium BC, during the eruption at in what is now modern day Santorini in Akrotiri, they've actually excavated. They found an altar-like space. I'm going to call it altar-like because, you know, archaeologists, they always want to make it be about some kind of religious practice, but it seemed like an altar-like space. And they found a human body, the bones, and the bones of this body showed signs of scraping, which is a sign that they were they were eaten, like the meat was scraped away from the bones and consumed. And they suspect that was the idea is, well, this was when all that tectonic activity was happening. Things were getting really bad, and probably it was a last-ditch effort to appease the gods, right? Like they thought, this'll do it. This will make the island stop shaking. Well, it didn't. The island exploded and there was this massive, nuclear winter that spread across the world. But they tried by sacrificing and eating someone. So, oh, thank you. That's actually not a curtain, that's a tapestry. A real tapestry. It's a replica, but it's a tapestry. But thank you. Yeah, I have about 88 of these things that are behind me in storage in Albuquerque. So, yeah.
Is that tapestry from what's it called? Just up in the Netherlands area?
No,
that one,
this
or
is
that
a
one from
French one.
Florence?
It's the La Dame à la Licorne. It's in the Cluny Museum in Paris now. And what's interesting about this series, The Lady and the Unicorn is what a lot of people know it as, is that it was actually woven as what's called a chambre, a chamber. And a chamber of tapestries is actually is a series of tapestries that were woven specifically to fit a specific room, so that every part of the wall in the room would be covered by this tapestry, but that the doors would be, exposed, the windows would be exposed. So that's why you get this tapestry series is a little weird, because the tapestries are all these odd sizes. But then if you imagine, well, it was meant originally to fit a very specific room, then it all makes sense. So that's what this whole series, it's about the five senses and desire. So there's so can you guess, I don't know, how well can you see this? Can you guess which sense this one probably is? Which is the sense of what? Of your five senses? Hearing, yes, exactly. This is hearing.
Yeah. The sense of
That's not
music.
a
Is that not a
sense.
sense in itself?
Sense
No?
of rhythm, maybe.
I don't have the sense of
No,
music
but
anyway.
this is the sense of hearing. And each one of them, like there's the sense of touch, sense of sight, sense of smell, and touch, taste, smell. I feel like there's five. I don't know why I'm missing some of them. Hearing, and then desire. And it's all got ladies, and there's unicorns, and there's a lion. And this crazy thing is that all of them have, you can sort of see it. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. The flag, right? This coat of arms. And I forget which count that is. But this is the coat of arms of the arms of the family who commissioned it. And they're in all of these. And these are like the most reproduced tapestries in the world. So this guy's coat of arms is like one of the most immortal set of non-royal coat of arms in the history of humanity. Because, they're on tote bags, they're on pillows, they're on scarves. So, this guy managed to attain immortality just because someone in the 18th century folded up the tapestries, put them in a chest, and the chest got forgotten. And they found it at the end of the 19th century. And they were all just in perfect condition, basically, like pretty perfect. Unfortunately, they decided that they were going to use them as curtains, so they cut them up to fit. Yeah. They've been put back together.
Lovely.
They've been fixed. They've been healed. Yep, pepper tea, exactly. They've been healed. And that's not the only set of tapestries that has happened to. There's one in the cloisters at the Met that's of the 9 worthies, the 9 classical heroes. And someone literally cut them into strips so they could be curtains for windows. Like they took this massive, massive tapestry and cut it into like 9 pieces or something. Yeah.
Okay. That literally I had oh yes. Do you know what? This is a question for you. Actually, I have 2 questions. I'm trying to remember the other question. I got somebody asked me a question for you early on. And I was like, oh, that's a Rachel question. I'll ask Rachel later. But the first one I have anyway is from, what was it called? The Viking Age. You know the Viking Age, right?
Yeah, the Viking Age, yes. I'm familiar with it.
You know how some Viking reenactors will always, and you see this in the television show, this is where it mostly comes from, animal fur.
Oh, yeah, the whole pelt,
shoulders.
the whole animal, right? Head and all. Yeah.
Right. Anything. is there anything to them wearing pelt? Would they have worn it to bed? Would they worn it onto the bed? Would they've gone
Okay,
outside
the
with it?
pelt would have
No.
been on their bed. It would have been like part of their mattress arrangement,
Okay.
right? And it would have been like a sheep's pelt, like a nice, or depending on how far north they are, reindeer, right? Because reindeer pelts are, oh my God, lush. But reindeer pelts shed like a mother. Yeah, they're bad. So yeah, no, pelts, no. You don't, why would you? No, you would take that pelt and you would use it for padding your, your mattress in your nice little, your
Mm,
little sort of space that where your bed is. They weren't barbarians. They were, God, the Norse were such fashion sluts, right? Like, God, I hope I don't get banned for that.
mm.
They were,
I know you
they
probably will
were,
in a
they
second. Check
they were all
monetization
about
quick.
colors. They were all about silk. They were all about bling. And I mean, big time bling, out huge brooches
Mm,
and enameling and gems. We find silver Buddhas in freaking Norse graves. So this is how much they're into
mm.
the shiny. They're not gonna put a freaking animal pelt on them. Why? It's so inconvenient. Have you ever tried to wear an animal pelt and do something? It
But this is it, right? We have so in Ireland we have the guys who get the animal pelts because we have animal pelt finds both in Dublin and Cork, right? So they did
sure.
have them, but if you look at the depictions and pictures, none of them are ever wearing it. It is always the cloak. You always see them having the cloak with the brooch on, especially in Ireland where we have endless amount of brooch finds, especially the beautiful
Yeah.
Kilkenny brooch and the Tara brooch. So the brooches are definitely the bling in
Yeah.
Hiberno, Scandinavian, Dublin, Cork, Waterford, etc. Right? But we also have not only do we have pelts, but we have crossbows in Cork. We found a load of crossbow finds in Viking Cork, and they're specifically designed for hunting animals and not damaging the
Right.
animals in
The
Cork.
tracks.
So exactly. So they were definitely taking pelts, but I'm like thinking to myself, so was this nightwear? Would they have just put this on during the
Nah.
nighttime? Would it have just been
I
for the
I
bed? Like
I
what
think
are
they
they
would.
using this
So
for?
so probably at this point there is not a big import of Persian rugs, right? Rugs are not a
Mm,
native thing in Europe yet, and they're not native at all. We're still importing them, but we haven't. Turkish rugs, Persian rugs, rugs from Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, all the stands, they haven't made their way into Europe yet. So floors are
mm,
cold, floors are nasty, possibly. Yes, you can absolutely cover them in rush mats, which if you live near marshes, right, they're easy enough to make. It's not hard, but they're not going to be
mm.
as warm and nice on the feet as putting down a nice pelt and stepping on the pelt, right? So
Yeah,
my feeling is they're going
that's
on
very true.
beds, they're going possibly on furnishings, maybe on benches, right? Maybe on chairs as a kind of upholstery, right? This
Mm,
predates the era of upholstery in the sense of it being attached to the wooden furniture. But we know that for literally millennia, people have been making soft things to put on hard furniture.
mm,
So, you could put it on long benches on the ground, and then you have a nice thing on, in your sleeping area, you have a nice thing on which to walk. But I particularly like pelts on when I do my medieval 15th century glamping setup. I have nice sheep hides, like
mm,
lamb's hides that are nice and woolly, and they add extra fluff. They go under my sheet, but on top of the mattress. They're
mm.
warm at night. They breathe, so you don't actually sweat. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, wearing them, no, just no. I mean, not in that era. Like in the era that predates woven textiles, maybe, but but they're textiles. We've been weaving fabric. We don't need to do that anymore.
Mm, mm, mm. Oh, I have comments coming in on my side with some of them because I had a comment there praising you, but I noticed it didn't pop up on the main comments. I'm not. I just apologize to you guys there. The comments that are not getting through because I've seen some of those comments coming through and they're actually praising yourself there, Rachel. I don't think they're offensive, but for some reason the algorithm is, kind of stopping
Uh,
the praising comments. I think they got
ah,
rewritten there and sent over. Yeah, yeah. Normal is overrated. Your comment has actually gotten through now. So just be aware of that, guys, is that some of the comments aren't getting through. So if you feel like we're not responding to the comments, For some strange reason, the algorithm is just deleting the comments. Maybe they're just being very, very strict right now because of the advertisement that's going through. But none of them, from what I've seen, none of them are offensive. They're just praising Creative Contessa and her work. Yeah,
I think it's, I don't know. I was able to scroll back up to Normal's comment. Thank you, Normal. Welcome to my community. Philip and I are trying to grow a kind of co-community. So thank you for joining the bigger community of us medievalists in Asia.
I know, right? What are these two lunatics doing out in Asia?
Medievalists in exile.
I know, right? That's exactly what happened. Put me in the boat and kicked me out. Housing crisis, more like you're not allowed in crisis.
Oh, Nabi, why? What is it you want? So poor Nabi, my little rescue baby that I was talking about earlier, she still acts like a little baby kitten sometimes, and when she poos, she wants me to clean her butt for her. So she walks around and meows like a tiny kitten because that's what kittens do, because their mommies are supposed to do that for them. And I think she doesn't understand why I've never done it the way her mommy should have done it.
Oh yeah, lovely.
So if you all hear a tiny little mewing sound, that's just my cat still thinking she's a newborn kitten, unfortunately. Yeah. So yeah, I just, I call the fur hides, I call that medieval market fashion because, in Germany, you always saw people at medieval markets with the furs, wearing hides, just wearing hides, as though the medieval world wasn't all about the extremely expensive woven fabrics. It's the same way that, the Vikings or other Norse people who weren't actually Vikings are always depicted in, first millennium gray, I call it. And then,
yeah, I know, right? Especially when you're getting all that silk over from the Byzantine Empire, because I was covering that with my classes online last week, and I'll be covering it again actually tomorrow, which is today for you guys. So if you guys haven't already popped over, definitely go over to my Patreon and sign up to my online classes because I'll be covering the trade tomorrow, actually. The silk trade that's going from the Byzantine Empire over to Ireland and making us lots and lots of money. But we know from all the archaeological digs that were done in Dublin that the Dublin Vikings were insanely colorful, which matches with the literature as well, because in the literature, it talks about the fact that you have the men of Dublin led by Omlid Ciaran, the king of Dublin at the time, and the, what was his name? Mael Shocknall II, the over-king of Ireland at the time, is terrified by this force because they have their riveted mail on over their silk. So they have their silk on, then they have a gambeson on top of that, and then they have riveted mail on. And so he sees them, and it literally glitters. So the silk that he can see on over the riveted mail and all the other bits and bobs, he can see the silk glittering. I also have a theory as well that, because I've seen a few people putting the coats on over the riveted mail. So I have a theory as well that they may have put a coat on over the riveted mail.
I mean, why would you hide that under oily mail? Why would you do that when you can put on the shiny thing on top? That makes total sense to me. And there's a chronicle, I think a 10th century Irish chronicle talking about, I'm pretty certain it's the sacking of Dublin. And it talks about how the women, when the invaders come to drag them from the houses, all the women are dressed in silk. Like all the women in the town are dressed in silk. So this horrible moment it's describing, and yet for fashion historians, it's of interest.
Yeah. Well, is that 15th century or is that early medieval?
No, that is 10th century.
10th century. Geez, so that is the what was it called? That could be because Dublin is sacked multiple times. But what's very interesting about Dublin as well is a lot of women are involved with the administration that's going on, because the original person who founded the administration in Dublin is actually what's her name? The famous Icelandic woman, Aid the Deep-Minded. She's one of the original women that set up the administration to Viking Age Dublin. And then because her husband Olaf the White was kicked out, well, he was killed actually. She
Right.
had to do an old legger. She got all of her Irish administration and went up to Iceland, which is also funny because a lot of Icelanders will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about the reason why they have Irish DNA is because we went down and stole all the Irish women and turned them into our slaves,
No, they
completely
didn't. That
ignoring.
wasn't Iceland at all. Do they know
Yeah.
nothing about their own history?
The amount, I swear, the amount of YouTubers I've come across
Oh
from
my God.
Iceland that keeps preaching this complete gobshitery, and even at reenactments events, I've bumped into Icelanders, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, stop!
That is not the whole point. One of the whole points of Iceland is that it was all of these disparate peoples coming from disparate parts of Northern Europe and looking for a new life that wasn't tied into the way things were. So
A good chunk of aid the DeepMinded's administration that she brought up from Dublin up to Ireland literally says Irish men. So not just Irish women went up with her, right? Which would have been a part of that whole administration, but Irish men went up to her as well, as long as they respected her as the superior one. Now, don't get me wrong, Aid the DeepMinded herself was from that kind of Denmark, Norway blur during the early medieval period, and she immigrated into Ireland. But her entire administration that she set up in Dublin, they were a mixture of Scandinavian and Irish. That's why they're literally referred to as the Hiberno-Scandinavians.
Right. Yeah, no, it's the amount of pop history that's out there with all kinds of misconceptions. You know, like I just published this crazy viral video on me just sitting there sewing and talking about medieval laundry practices. But one of the comments responses was, "Oh, they put their clothes on grass. That must be why they're full of fleas." And I'm like, "Why? You think that there are fleas in grass? Fleas can't live in grass. They need blood. They live on animals."
But it's crazy that we were saying earlier on that if we had somebody from 500 AD go to the 16th century, they would think the 16th century person was a genius. But if we had somebody from 500 AD go to our era, or even the person from the 16th century to our era, they would think we were stupid because we have no survival. It's interesting that most people look back at the past and think they're all stupid. You know,
Right.
It really does reinforce the fact that we're living in a dark age and we're truly so ignorant. We don't realize how ignorant we are.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying, if that person is watching, I'm not trying to make fun of you, please. I'm not trying to do that. But that's the kind of things that people believe that, oh, well, if your clothes are outside on the grass, they must pick up fleas. Like, no. You get fleas from living with your animals, which medieval people did because 80% of Europe was peasants and they brought their animals inside at night. So, yeah, it's very interesting, the misconceptions that are out there. That's what we should do as one of our sessions. We should do a busting medieval myths and just find like the most outrageous medieval myths, not just Ireland or Italy, but wherever in Europe.
I
And
could
talk
not
about
stop
them
talking
and
about Ireland
diffuse
though.
them.
You start that, right? You start that off. What was it? I was about to say Yuki because I'm so used to bitching about what was it? Pop history in Ireland. Because you have to remember, all of pop history in Ireland is that Ireland always needs to be the stupid one, and England needs to come in and civilize us all the time. So every single time I'm dealing with somebody who comes at me with pop history, it must be the Irish are stupid. Why are the Irish stupid? And this is why the English are civilizing us. Stop.
Right.
I even I started off today with a comment saying, why doesn't Ireland have a standing army? So I was like, Ireland does. We have the Gallo Glass. We have, Gaelic mercenary companies. They are organized by the Fitzgeralds. That's why you have coin and levy. These are coin and levy laws that modernized the Irish military for the 15th century. Look how great the Fitzgeralds are. And then I had somebody turn around in the comment section and say, oh, that's why the Irish lost. And I'm like, but the Fitzgeralds didn't lose. They won coming out of the 100 Years' War. They were in a very positive position. And also they had beaten the King of England, which was Richard II. So Richard II invaded twice. He got pretty lucky the first invasion. The second invasion, his army was absolutely in bits, which gave Henry Bolingbroke
Yeah.
enough time to get back to England, raise a small military force, but it was bigger because Richard II's military force was completely disemboweled because they were constantly being ambushed and smashed and ambushed again and smashed again, right? So
Right.
when he finally got back to England, he still had a small enough force, but his force did not want to fight Henry Bolingbroke's force, so they completely surrendered, and that was that, right? Then on top of that, so that put the likes of the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers in a very positive, strong position. Then we go into the period of the Wars of the Roses, and the Fitzgeralds, they just go from victory to victory to victory to a point where they actually invade England with the Battle of Stokefield. So they were able, once the Tudors had taken the crown in England, the Fitzgeralds were able to organize an invasion of England and have the final battle in the Wars of the Roses. The final battle is an Irish invasion. The Fitzgeralds invading into the north of England to capture York, something they hadn't done since the early medieval period and the period of the Irish Vikings, the men of Dublin, invading York in the 10th century. That's how much the Irish are pushing into the English. Now, they lost that battle. The Battle of Stoke was the Battle of Stokefield. Because they weren't securing their flanks properly. And what was it? Henry VII, he was absolutely brilliant. Don't get me wrong. Very, very switched on fella. He had, pulled off one amazing victory after another amazing victory. And he just, once again, if you leave those opportunities open to Henry VII, he's going to exploit it. He's going to take full advantage of it. And he managed to pull it off again. So a mixture of luck and a mixture of him taking full advantage of the situation. And from there, Henry VII, he's somebody you don't want to leave any openings to. He takes full advantage and he manages to push back into Dublin and reoccupy Dublin, and it officially becomes the Pale. Henry VII, he's a really blunt guy. Like, there's a reason why they refer to him as the Winter King. And so he turns around and he says, well, the Lordship of Ireland, that doesn't exist anymore. This is literally the Pale. And he literally turns around to the Fitzgeralds and he says to Gerald Fitzgerald, you are king all but in name. That's Henry VII, a very, very blunt guy. And what was it called? The main point I'm trying to say here is that, the Irish military isn't shite. The fact that they were able to push over to England and give Henry VII a run for his money,
Well, it's funny if you think about how history could have gone differently. Like Ireland ultimately ends up siding on the wrong, Henry VII wins, blah, blah, blah. But then they go and they side with some of his pretenders. And, if that hadn't happened, things, everything could have been different, right? Yep. Because that had consequences. And by they, it's like that suggests that Ireland is some kind of unified thing, which it isn't.
That's complicated though,
right?
And it is very complicated, and it's important that you highlight and ask the question of what is the unification, because it's constantly, like myself and Kevin in the Breton Academy have been talking about and debating how decentralized administration works in Ireland, and how the Irish clans are linked through fosterage, hostage, and marriage alliances. And the problems that come with that is that instead of having the man with the biggest stick, so at that point, the Fitzgeralds were the people with the biggest stick. Right. And because they had an alliance with the O'Neills and the O'Donnells, for the most of the time, the O'Neills and O'Donnells respected that alliance that they had between the two. However, if Fitzgerald is in a situation where he doesn't have the biggest stick, he's not in a centralized state. He's in a decentralized state. Right. So his the people who are supposed to be under him behave more like allies, because of marriage alliances, etc., and fosterage, and so on and so forth. So they behave more like allies than they do of a state, compared to England. If the English are in a losing position, because they're centralized under the King of England, it doesn't matter. And you can see that with the 100 Years' War. The King of England, Edward III, goes from one losing situation to the next losing situation to the next losing situation, and he barely wins them. But because he's centralized, he's able to take these risks. The Fitzgeralds cannot take risks. They take risks and they don't have the support. And that's what causes them to lose battle after battle after battle. And they don't even have the support from the O'Neills and the O'Donnells. because it's a decentralized state, although it works most of the time on how to govern Ireland, if you want to really smash or even take risks, you can't do it because you don't have the backing of the clans. You need the backing of the clans to get the job done. So Ireland is at a state where it's in this, like, if you want to refer to it as, like, a lot of people refer to it as like a sewn in king groups, where you have these king groups, these clans who are sewn in together through marriage alliances and
Right, right.
fosterage and so on and so
Which,
forth, and
which, by the
tributary.
way, makes the study of Irish history really hard.
Yeah, it
Because
does.
because so many of the names are like, wait a minute, wasn't he alive 70 years ago? Oh, it's a guy with the same name again. Oh, this is awesome. Great.
Because
Thank
I need to
you.
respect my grandfather. I am the, what
Right.
was it, the reincarnation of my grandfather, which is a part of Celtic paganism, which then goes into folklore. So they still believe in their own folklore. So yeah, it makes it complicated. Even, and by the way, the folklore doesn't magically disappear. Like, everyone's like, okay, so when did they stop believing in that? And I'm like, well, my grandmother kind of believes in that.
Right.
I mean, she does, like. And it's not just my grandmother. If you go to UCC today, University College of Cork, nobody will step on the coat of arms. And because the reason why they won't step on a coat of arms is the fertility. Do you know how the Irish believe that in rubbing and fertility and stuff?
Yes. Yeah.
So still today, modern Irish students believe if you touch a coat of arms, your fertility will go up. So they literally believe, so in the middle of the square, the Irish students will go around the coat of arms because it's
Nice.
on the floor itself. Luke was in the comment section below. I forgot to say hi to him earlier on because I just barely saw his comment. If Luke is still in there, he'll confirm, because he went to UCC, and he'll confirm the coat of arms that's on the ground, the Irish students will go around because they believe it will get them pregnant. And that goes back to the old fertility folklore. So Irish people still today believe in their folklore, which is connected back to their old Irish paganism, which is then influenced with the whole Celtic paganism with Gaul and Galatia and all that.
Right. And it's interesting how a lot of people want to have it as an either or situation, right? Either paganism is gone and it's 100% Christian beliefs all the time, or everyone is still pagan. And I have to remind people that that's not how religion works.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Korea, and the same thing in Japan and Japanese Buddhism, right? Buddhism hits Korea in the 7th century, and well, there's already an established system of beliefs. It's animist, it's shamanistic, right? There's a spirit for everything. The mountain has a god, the trees have a god, this mountain has a different god, right? And so Buddhism comes in and everyone's like, okay, well, we still have our gods of the mountains and our goddesses of the mountains, but now we have Buddha. So Buddha's on top of them. Right. So that's like, I actually, someone had said, I go to Buddhist temples with my Buddhist friends here in Korea, these 1,300-year-old temples. And I'm looking and I'm like, who's that painting? Who is that? Like, oh, well, that's the god of this mountain. I'm like, but this is a Buddhist temple. They're like, yeah, he's under Buddha. And that all lines up with their Neo-Confucian belief in hierarchy. So you've got the older shamanistic beliefs of, animist beliefs of everything has a spirit. And then you've got Buddhism, and then later on came Neo-Confucianism, and they just made it all fit, right? They just made it all work. They didn't get rid of anything. They kept it all. And so,
because you have that even in my own family. What was it? My own mother and her grandmother, so on and so forth, all believe in the Banshee, right? And the Banshee go all the way back to the Morgan, because if you look at the Morgan, who was studied by the Irish Christian monks, there's loads of similarities from the Irish Christian monk interpretation of the Morgan that was written in around the 11th century, which is in the Tomba Cooley, right? That similarity can be seen with the modern day, not just the modern day Banshee, but the Banshee is also mentioned around the 14th and 15th century with the Fitzgeralds. So the Fitzgeralds have their own Banshee, do you know?
Interesting. So you mean like their own Banshee at their castle, like that haunts them kind of thing?
So it became popular around the 14th and 15th century to kind of show off your Gaelicism by having a Banshee in the family, that you literally believed that the women in your family was going to be collected by the Banshee. Because
Cool.
and
That's
this
great.
is where it becomes this is where it starts to branch off then, because I think it was after World War II, Eamon de Valera wanted to collect all of the folklore. So he sent folklorists out to gather all of the folklore, and he noticed straight away village per village per village had their own interpretation of folklore. And now modern day, I think it's Maynooth University has suddenly clicked. It's the same thing to do with Celtic paganism. That's why Celtic paganism in Ireland has a different interpretation in France when the Romans are documenting it, when they're doing, their invasion into Gaul and stuff. So you have similarities. So what Maynooth University now thinks is that every village would have heard of a particular god or goddess, and they themselves would have had their own pronunciation and their own interpretation of that god or goddess. So somebody would have, so let's say the same river is going through, okay, let's say you live in a place called Kilkenny, right? And I live in a place called Mallow, right? These are imaginary places. It's not the real Kilkenny or Mallow. And we have the same river going through, right? Let's say if it's the River Blackwater, right? I believe that there's a spirit in the Blackwater, and I call it the Blackarunian god, right? I say it to you, you come over because we have a marriage alliance or something going on at some assembly where I want to marry my daughter to your son, right? And I explain, oh, the river Blackuri or whatever. I explain that to you. You hear about it. You go tell the rest of your family, but you can't remember exactly the correct pronunciation because you say things different because of your accent and stuff. So then the name of the goddess is different, and because you're trying to remember what I told you, you now have a different interpretation. Right. And then it becomes Chinese whisper. We say to your family and the family, da, da, da. And now you have a completely different interpretation of that god or goddess. That's what they think has happened in Celtic paganism. Why they're so similar, but have a different spelling and understanding.
I mean, from a linguistic perspective, that makes total sense. As being originally a linguist before the machines ate my career field, yeah, that is how it works. That is the telephone game is a thing. Let me see. There's a comment here. I've bumped into some of those shaman chaps in the highest mountain in South Korea. People still consult shamans here in Korea. In fact, if Philip, when you come visit me, because I know you're going to, I will take you and Yuki to the market where you can go and buy shaman supplies. So like you can buy the spells already written out, the protective talismans and all that, and you can get the crazy costumes for the dances. Crazy in the best possible way, by the way. These costumes are pretty amazing. So absolutely. Let's see. Did we miss anything else? Let's see. My father and his older brother were dressed in little dresses till they were 3 to stop the shoot. How's that word pronounced, Philip?
Oh, yeah. The Sheed, the fairy folk. You see, that's another
you
thing.
told me about
You're
that,
referring
right?
to the Sheed, and I'm referring it to as fairy folk. That's exactly what I mean, where we have the same. And there, by the way, because I went to university, I know exactly what you're talking about. But if I hadn't have gone to university, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? That's exactly what I mean, where you have a different spelling or different thing, but it's the same understanding. Right. So you're talking about the fairy folk. Me and Rachel, we were talking about this. You know how they used to do the tunics on the sons really, really young?
Yeah.
Really, really big tunics for little kids. And it became, by the time we're getting up to around the 18th, would you say about 18th, 19th century, they would have just turned into dresses for little boys.
Yeah, basically the 19th.
Grown into proper tunics and stuff. Certain. Yeah. And then it definitely became folklore. I do reckon it was the mothers were making tunics for and there's a few other people now that have said it, and I think you said it as well to me, that it definitely makes sense that they were making tunics for the little boys to grow into the tunic. And then when they grew into the tunic, that's when they started making them pants. That's the theory I have. And because tunics look exactly like dresses.
I mean, yeah, to the modern eye, especially if it's not a fitted one, there's certainly not much in the way of differences there. There's another good reason that you would want to dress your toddlers, no matter the gender, in a flowing, bottomless thing, and that's because of potty training. So in the Middle Ages, children they didn't really diaper. They didn't diaper toddlers.
Yeah.
So literally they would just
This
run
was people were
around
saying to me
in
as well, yeah.
bottomless shirts, all boys and girls.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
there's a very practical reason that may have been the case.
I literally, the more people have been turning around to me, because there's areas in Sweden and everything where they actually have entire festivals about what was it called? Because they believe that's when the gender, because they don't believe when a boy or girl is born, they have a correct gender until they hit a certain age, and that's when they're recognized of their gender. I think it's over in Sweden or Norway or something. That once they wear pants, that's when they are of their gender.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And there's an entire ceremony and everything around that. Well, a big festival and everything of when they finally start wearing pants.
That makes sense. Yeah. The pant. There's actually, what is it? They call it pantsing, I think. Like there is a, there's, if you read accounts written by men from the 19th century or about men from the 19th century, they talk about, I was still in short pants back then. So it was like, definitely a rite of passage to go from your dress to short pants and then to, actual proper trousers sort of thing.
I just want to go through,
Yeah.
what was it? Philip, any idea when Ireland was Celticized, and would you consider, oh, you really opened up the can of worms with
Oh my
that
God.
one. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my interpretation of what is Celtic culture in Ireland, which is the old 90s interpretation, because the reason why I keep to the old 90s interpretation is so we can actually have a conversation, because the word Celtic has become so complicated now. It's just like, how am I even supposed to have an English conversation? So I'm assuming that you're still in line with my understanding of what is a Celt and what is Celtic culture. And Celtic culture is everything that's between 300 BC to 100 AD. And that was the 90s interpretation. Now, the problem I have is exactly, from a modern perspective, is exactly the same problem they had back in the 1920s, the 1930s. And your man who actually wrote The Lord of the Rings was bitching about this back in the 20s and 30s when he set up the Celtic civilization. And actually, not only did he set up Celtic civilization in Wales for university students, but he also set up the Celtic civilization department in Ireland, in Cork. What's his name again? Tolkien, that's the one. So he writ down and bitched the guy who set up Celtic civilization that the word Celtic was being used as too much of an umbrella term. So even back in the 20s and 30s, they had a problem with the term Celtic. Anyway, to make it simple, I always say that Celtic culture, to make it super easy, because when you think Celtic, you think of the Latin culture. That's what you think about. So to make conversations easy, I always try to identify, okay, so you're talking about Latin culture. And I'm assuming by the way you're talking there, you're talking about Latin culture. Oh yeah, but Bell Beaker. Well, that's where it gets even more complicated, because you have people trying to bring in Celtic culture in with Bell Beaker culture as well.
Isn't Bell Beaker, that term, isn't that based on the kind of pottery they made? Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think Yuki's really good at Bell Beaker people and stuff. Yuki can really tell you a whole lot about Bell Beaker. So I would definitely put, so it was a culture wave into Ireland. It was originally thought that the Celts had invaded and taken over Ireland. But when we studied the archaeological finds, we couldn't find a difference in the style of buildings. So in France, under the Gauls in France, they have a square house style. But in Ireland, we have the very beautiful the circular shape round houses. And there's no change in archaeological finds in Ireland. So there is no change of archaeology in Ireland, which shows that there were no invasions of Ireland at the time. So the Gael in Ireland, the Gaul in France do not invade Ireland. So what actually happens, because we can monitor somewhat the language from a linguistic point of view, And I'm not a linguistic specialist, by the way. I don't specialize in the linguistics. This is when you get into the real gritty stuff. And when you listen to Celtic linguistics, oh my God, they're just on the next the next level of deep understanding of Irish history. They'll literally, if you ever see them with a whiteboard writing, oh my God, they're absolutely, and their mind going 1,000 miles an hour. That's the difference between a high-level academic and me. Like,
well, I mean,
it's just completely
linguistics
different.
is really a science. Like, people don't understand that linguistics,
Really
it's a
is like,
science. And the people who analyze languages, because I linguistics is part of my field. It is really next level, and they view things from a different dimension of understanding.
oh yeah, yeah. So when you look at it from a linguistic perspective, they can see influences and changes that happen from 1,200 BC all the way down to what they can't see of that specifically. So a lot of it is very intelligent guesstimation, if that's a word.
Guesstimation. That is
What is it
brilliant.
called? So what they're seeing is influences coming in from France that make their way, or even from Turkey even. And then you go back, you can actually go all the way back to the Indo-European influences that come from the wider world as far as India, which you can actually find where there is people that even study modern Irish that I talk to on TikTok and stuff, and they can pick up keywords that you can also pick up in India. They'll sit down and they'll look at the Indian language and go, oh, I see that, I see this, and I see that. And I'm like, what the hell? But yeah, it seems to us that it seems to be more of a influence of trade coming into Ireland, that the merchants were very close and they were, yapping away, which was influencing the language. And then obviously with the Roman invasions, that seems to have brought it all to an end. Also on top of that as well, in the Bronze Age, from Ireland into Brittany and France, then all the way over to northern Spain, there seems to be a really, really close connection going on between that whole area there, which seems to affect all the languages in that whole area. So Celticization, if you want to call it that, was a more of a trade of merchants. So it was more like merchants affecting the language rather than actual invasions going on. So that's quite an interesting one.
You know what? When I immigrated to Germany when in 2002 because I got a scholarship to study at the University of Heidelberg, and before that point, I was kind of peripherally aware of the ancient Celts, and I don't mean the Irish Celts. I mean as a people, but I had no real understanding until I moved to the heart of ancient Celtic society, which is Rhine, the Rhine basin of Germany, sort of the Rhine-Main-Neckar, and there was so much Celtic archaeology there, Celtic hill graves, Celtic hill forts, Celtic chieftains with these glorious tombs and these amazing finds in them, right? And that gave me a whole different understanding of Celtic as not just this thing that happened up in the Isles, because of course, for most people, you say Celtic, they think Irish, and that's it. That's full stop. Ireland. Brittany is forgotten. Galicia is forgotten. Germany, the rest of France, for God's sake, the Gauls is where the word Gaelic comes from. So, it's, so there's this for amnesia, I would almost call it, of that the Celts were a migratory people, and they started probably out in the steppes, somewhere in the Ural Mountains maybe, and migrated westward, and just kind of, as their civilization grew, they kept spreading out. And they didn't even, it's not like they left, they stayed, and then some peoples went onward, right? So what is Celtic in Germany is not necessarily at all the same as what's Celtic in France in that era. It's not the same as what's Celtic in northern Spain either, so that's a real complicated question. When did Irish become Celtic? Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, it was more, it seems to us that listening to the linguistics and stuff, it was definitely a influence that came in with the merchants and traders rather than a massive invasion from Gaul into Ireland. Now, the next thing, just to get back to your question, what's the difference between Gaelicization and what was it called? Celticization. If I'm trying to understand your question correctly, we'd have to go back into the linguistic side of things, which once again isn't my field of expertise. How different was the language
Oh,
from what was
mhm.
it, 400 AD to what was it? Sorry, no, 300 BC up to 400 AD is something I definitely couldn't tell you. And because I can't tell you that, I really couldn't tell you the difference between what the culture was like in 300 BC, as you were saying there. Like you were even pointing out there that Latin culture didn't really get to Ireland, which, you know, that's also a very good point as well, because in Ireland, we don't have Latin culture. We have what is people refer to as insular Latin. And that even depends what's your interpretation of what is Latin culture, which is definitely out of my field of expertise, because you're talking more of Iron Age Ireland rather than medieval
Right.
Ireland. Really interesting questions, but definitely way out of my field of expertise, not only because of the archaeological finds around 300 BC up to 100 AD, which is all Iron Age Ireland stuff, but also from a linguistic perspective of what's the difference between the language in Ireland from 300 BC up to 400 AD, which is really interesting, and definitely something, if I do get a hold of a archaeologist next door, my wife, who's busy right now, and if I do get a hold of a linguistic next, especially around UCC and stuff, definitely have to poke and prod and see what the difference is, and if they could, because remember, we don't have any written records until St. Patrick appears and he starts to write his apology letters, and then we have the Ogham writing as well. So you'd have to look at the Ogham writing and see if we can see any
Yeah, so
original,
so
you know, influences from
so I can tell
300
you how linguists would go about that, because I'm a linguist. So they would try to, using our understanding of how language generally evolves, they would try to sort of, and I this is not the right word, but the right word isn't springing to mind. They would try to de-evolve the language, regress it. That's what I'm looking for. De-evolve is way too judgmental. They would try to regress the language back to an earlier state, and they would try to take into account, well, what external influences were there in the have there been in the intervening years, and they would try to identify those influences and in the language, let's say the language around the time of St. Patrick. And then they would try to extract those influences to come up with a conjectural reconstruction of what they would probably call like Proto-Gaelic or Proto-Irish or something like that, right? But yeah, that's how the process would be hypothetically. That's how it works. So yeah, how much reconstruction they've actually successfully done, I don't honestly know. I know that there's a lot of people, especially to get their PhDs, who are out there in linguistics, are out there trying to regress, like they're trying to figure out what ancient Basque was like, before Latin kind of came in and really changed the language. They're trying to figure out what Indo-European, in quotes, might have been as a language. So, there are people out there who specialize in that. Philip and I are not they.
Yeah, definitely not. I love languages, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely outside my field of expertise. I am terrible when it comes down to languages and stuff. Don't get me wrong, I pick up words like Ridra and Galloglass and all that kind of stuff from doing, the research that I'm doing and stuff, and taking the information out I need, especially because everyone turns around to me and actually says, like, even, what was it, Diarmuid Scully and stuff, professor up in University College of Cork, and says, you're definitely a military historian, because of the way I could pick history, pick out the information I need and then remember the information and then give the correct interpretation. And I do have that large military background because I had been both in the military, and the fact that I do look at everything from a military perspective. So that does give my interpretation from that side of things and stuff. So that would be more my field of expertise, especially when I get involved with the likes of, as living history and stuff, and trying to reenact and try to see what a battlefield would have looked like during that period and stuff. But when it comes down to the linguistic side of things, which is still very important to understand the battlefield, especially when it comes down to understanding cattle raiding and equipment, because if you look up, for example, when they're getting the retinue up and stuff, there's a certain play on words with like Bonachta and the word wicker and wicker shields and all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly, like, wicker shields, why is the word wicker shield being played in with Bonachta in Old Irish and stuff? So it makes people ask questions and stuff, something that I can't really pick up and explain right now, but it does pick up my notice as well. And it's definitely, when I got hold of a linguistic, something I poke and prod at, to ask, okay, so why is Bonachta play on words on the wicker shield and stuff, and how does that play into the military tactics? That would be more my field of expertise. But it's quite interesting as well. There's something else I want to ask you there, Seamus. You were saying about the Gaelicization then, from your interpretation. Do you believe the language changes around the 5th century, with the rise of the Email going from Connacht into the north of Ireland, into Ulster? So that's just a question for Seamus.
Yeah. I think Seamus said he was more interested in the archaeology and the genetics and the culture. And I'm definitely not generally, I'm only interested in the history, military aspect, insofar as it impacts material culture. Because I feel like people, military historians, not so you in general, but specifically, generally, military historians fall into the trap of only understanding history from the battlefield. And they forget about all of the really important cultural stuff and the material culture that really feeds so heavily into why battles happened in the first place.
Yes, big time, because of the administration. And this is something people seem to forget. Especially, like, the biggest problem I'm having right now is people think that Irish people can spawn out of mud huts and just harass the English.
Right.
That can't happen to a human being. You send a human being out into the cold, shitey climate, they will die. Their body can't handle it, and they'll just die. Yeah. There needs to be administration behind him to make sure he's able to conduct himself to as much as possible to 100%, so he can delete the enemy.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
I was studying, doing all the research for you for the medieval Irish fashion. It was shocking to me because I hadn't really paid close attention to how Ireland developed in the Middle Ages. I was familiar with the basics, but how organized these Irish cities are, right? How super sophisticated their administration is, how they have all of the bells and whistles of any continental European city. They've got walls, they've got wall taxes, they've got, guilds, they've got massive trade infrastructure, right? So, and they're, the textile finds, the archaeology shows all these luxury goods, right? And that's medieval Ireland. That's not Renaissance Ireland. That's not 19th. I would even say that possibly, from my understanding of Irish history, that the medieval cities in Ireland are more sophisticated and wealthier and better off than they are in later centuries.
I definitely would support that. Like, okay, first and foremost, you have that new book I sent over to you of Kearns and Gallowglass, that you 100% paid for.
Absolutely, I did.
What was it called? Of Kearns and Gallowglass. He points out the administration, and he points out straight away how the cities were connected into the the nobility who were living out in the countryside. So the biggest problem is, when we look at the administration of Ireland, we're looking at it from an English and French perspective. And if you look at it from an English-French perspective, that cuts off the connection from the countryside into the city. You need to just take a step back and relearn everything. Okay, so you can use that as somewhat of a base foundation that, hey, look, you're in the 15th century. But then you need to walk away from it, because the castles are way out in the countryside, and they're the ones running the administration for the cities, not the other way around. So you have the noble who's doing the main assemblies in castles, rather than, and you can correct me on this one, Rachel, rather than the likes of Richard II, for example, who's doing his main administration inside the city areas, London, for example, or Chester. He's doing his administration there. Unlike Desmond Fitzgerald, who's way out in the countryside, or the O'Briens, for example, the O'Briens who are connected to Limerick, they're doing Limerick's administration in Bunratty Castle at the assemblies, So as you said there, completely different administration that's actually very advanced, you know, because they have to bring in these accountants, they have to bring in all these people who have a connection into the bigger, wider world, and then work out how the administration works. So although the specialists, don't get me wrong, the specialists themselves who do understand the accountancy, they do live in the cities and they're watching it.
Right.
They wake up every single day, they're watching the pennies and stuff, but they still need to organize all that in the likes of Bharati Castle. And if you ever seen Bharati Castle, the castle's absolutely magnificent. It's huge. It's a nice big fancy chunk of a thing. Definitely not made for somebody who lives in a little mud hut, you know.
Right.
So it definitely is taken from a different perspective. But yeah, like, and this is why I get so bloody frustrated at pop history. And this whole understanding of, you know, you have the man from the mud hut who gets up in the morning and then has to harass the English, and he has no form of administration, and he can just live forever because he's got, you know, a pelt on his back, you know, happy out. Yeah. As long as he's got a big fur thing on his back, he's good.
And of course, he's wearing nothing but, you know, from the waist down. He's just naked with his fur. That's it, you know.
Yeah. Why not? Like, you know, just because the elements might kill him off.
Whatever,
like,
man. I mean, you know, he's gonna live forever.
Sure, this guy's fur.
So, you know, it's really funny you say that, because as I'm reading these records in these cities, looking for evidence of fashion, of clothing, of material culture, you know, I'm finding things like wills, and the wills are suspiciously absent of nobility, right? So the wills in Dublin, there's one person, and that's the, you know, the Lord Protector of Ireland, you know, Sir Michael Tregery, yeah, however you pronounce his last name, right? His will is in Dublin. It's actually lodged in Dublin. But otherwise, everyone is basically of the middling sort, right? They're merchants, they're soldiers of a, you know, lower rank. You know, you know, even in England, in York, for instance, the wills lodge there, you have some minor gentry, right? You've got esquires, you've got knights, you have some barons, they register. But I noticed the lack of it in the Dublin wills and in the Cork wills. And now that you say that, it makes sense that, well, maybe even the aristocracy didn't even write wills. I don't know. Maybe the Irish nobles didn't write wills. Maybe they had a different system of inheritance than that which was being, you know, carried out in the cities. Because
it would have been record. That kind of stuff then goes to the Brehons. I think they might have given all that over to the Brehons, the ones who were also doing the laws and stuff.
Okay, right.
Michael is actually the one who would have sorted all that, because what happens is the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers switched to a clan system. So Ireland starts off in the early medieval period. You have the Tuat system, right? Now this gets a bit blurry per academic and stuff, but I'll make it insanely simple, right? So in the early medieval period, you have how Ireland is supposed to be ran, and that's in the Tuat system, which you can see in the early medieval period, which appears in 550. So in 550, after the Justinian plague has come in,
Wiped everyone out.
the Irish. The Irish are like, we're not going to live in these big, massive forts anymore. You know, those big, old-fashioned Celtic forts that you see all over Europe. The Irish are like, okay, we can't live in this anymore. Sure, at least the plagues. We don't like plagues, so they start building. Yeah, we're going to start building all these small little ring forts here, there, and everywhere. And that's why the monastic settlements, that's another theory, recent theory, of why all the monastic settlements are so small. They're not these big, massive cities, because everyone else is living out in ring forts. Everyone's got their own little private farmstead ring fort.
You know, you know, it's funny. I hate to break you, but it's just funny. You mentioned the Justinian plague. Like, that is the forgotten plague, right? Like, everyone talks about the Black Death. The Black Death was bad. Justinian plague was worse. It was the thing that really truly ended ancient Roman civilization. Like, that is what brought it all to us. It's not 476 is not the date the Western Roman Empire ended, right? The Justinian plague is when it ended, because there were so many. It was like 90% of the population died. So, you know, when 90% of your population dies, you no longer have critical mass to maintain public infrastructure, right? You no longer have people to keep the aqueducts in operation. No one can run the baths anymore. No one can keep the plumbing going. You know, that's really what ended it. I'm so glad you mentioned it. No one ever talks about the Justinian plague.
It's so important because I actually started studying ring forts. I've got the book is this thick and I've got it on the Kindle and I'm going through it. And they think because there's in 550 there's a sudden change and like, okay, so what happens? You look at the literature, the annals and stuff, and it talks about this plague that comes
Right.
into Ireland, and suddenly it's like the change in so there's no change. So this whole Celtic invasion, there's no change in archaeology, right? There's a sudden change, massive change in 550. And it's like, what the hell
That's
happens in Ireland that there's a huge shit? But yet there's huge, what was it called? Influences of the Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople. There's cross slabs from the 5th century all
right.
over Ireland, which goes to show that Ireland was heavily trading with the Byzantine Empire. What's happening in Byzantine Empire? The
They're
Justinian
dying.
plague. What's
They're
hit Ireland?
dying.
Why are the Irish freaking out? Why are the Irish running out of their ring forts and building these farmsteads? They're all trying to fucking, they're just like looking at their family going, okay, it was nice knowing the tribe.
That's right. We're
Bye.
out.
You know?
Goodbye.
Yeah. So what happens is they switch from the tribal system that we know with the Celts and suddenly switch to this new system, which is, what we refer to as the Tuat system. So they start having these small little king groups that are also kind of like really mixed as well, because they're still mixing amongst the families and stuff through fosterage, heritage, and
Right.
marriage alliances. So the Tuats aren't like, if you were to go into someone's farmstead ring fort, you're not just going to find one family. You're going to find multiple families who are all kind of linked together. But at the same time, they're still little private dwellings, just in case the plague wants to reappear, which it
Right.
does. It
Of course
does.
it does.
When the next one, the Black Plague reappears, it barely touches the Gaelic Irish, but wrecks up the
Oh, yeah.
English. Like it brings, and this is 1,000 years later. The Irish, because of the annals, the Irish have not forgotten the plague. So when it hits, everyone just gets back into their fortifications, and they're just like, "That was nice talking to you, Justin. I have to go now."
I
And
have
closes
to
up
go
their
now.
fort. That's That's why the Irish keep going back into these tiny little communities, because they're terrified of another plague. The Irish really don't forget.
Everyone else did.
What was it called?
Everyone else forgot.
Yeah.
But after the Black Death, they stopped. Like they never forget again. In mainland Europe, after in England, after that 1340s disaster, no one forgets again. And in fact, that's one of the theories why the bathhouses get shut down all over Europe at the end of the 15th, early 16th century, because someone figured out, yes, the Reformation comes along and they said, oh, you can't have bathhouses, that leads to bad behavior. But also apparently someone put two and two together and realized that bathhouses were a way that disease got transmitted. I'm not just, yes, that kind of disease, but also the plague. So, it's they didn't forget, and it took them a while to figure out every way that they needed to get around it, because it kept coming back. I think the last outbreak of what is basically the Black Death, the bubonic plague, is end of the 17th century. I mean, there's another outbreak in London. Poor London, man. 1665, the plague comes back. 1666, the city burns down. So, it just keeps coming.
It's the same in Ireland. Yeah, this is the same in Ireland, where we think the Black Death is over, but we got little breakouts here and there. But the Gaelic society still isn't heavily affected because they keep to the old
You're
system.
dispersed.
Then when the Norman invasion comes in, when the Norman invasion happens, we get kind of like this bastard feudalism where they're trying to enforce these kind of like English ideas and stuff. But eventually what happens is that everyone that had immigrated during the Norman invasion of 1169 and 1171, they eventually become Gaelicized. And so what you have is this kind of new clan system that comes in, which is explained in, the Of Kearns and Gallowglass, the book I sent you. Just to jump over to Seamus, so you do believe that there was a massive change that happened with the rise of the Email, going from the old Celtic language into Old Irish. That's interesting. What do you think? It was Latin that influenced the Enales? Because if Latin had influenced the Enales, it would explain a lot of stuff, to be quite honest with you, and why St. Patrick hangs around with the Enales so much. Got me.
I mean, it's funny how Latin influenced so many languages without completely taking them over. Basque, as I said, 2,000 years ago, Basque was apparently massively influenced by Latin. And Basque is this bastard. No, that's the wrong word. Basque is this orphan language. in Europe. Like it has
Mm.
no known relative in the world, like in the world, no known relative. But, and yet still, despite that, they can actually document major changes that happened when the Romans, you know, basically came in and set up shop. But it didn't come, you know, it's still a very different language, but it has all this Latin influence now.
Mm. Oh, here, Seamus, what page is that? I've got that book. I have Early Irish Farming. Do you have Fergus Kelly's Early Irish Farming?
Yes, I do.
Rachel. That's
I
amazing
do
book.
not. It's referenced actually in the new book on textiles of Ireland. That is referenced in
You
there.
would love it. It's written in the 80s by Fergus Kelly. Anything to do with Fergus Kelly is absolutely gorgeous, but that's a book to buy. Early Irish Farming. I have to, because I'm covering the High Middle Ages
Population crash in
next month,
250.
and I'm covering.
Interesting.
What page is that on, Seamus? What page is that on? Because I have Early Irish Farming over
I
there.
mean, the ancient world had plagues. You know, like the plague that destroyed Athens during the Peloponnesian War, right? So the ancient world definitely also had its plagues. So I wonder if the population crash is being attributed to a plague also. I mean, you know, Romans were good at spreading disease too.
They were the best. On spite as well. It's not because they didn't understand plagues; they just did it on spite. They just didn't like me.
Yeah, totally. It's all about you. No, the you know, the let me see, what does he say? Oh, read.
1 second. The book I'm looking at, I just actually. Oh, I've got my phone here. 1 second. 1 second. I will send on that book to, because I have it on Kindle and it's a big juicy one. I'll send it on to
Cicada.
Seamus. Seamus, do you know what page that is
Nice.
on Early Irish Farming? And I will actually look up the book I
To
have
build
on
forts.
Irish ring forts. There it is.
Takeda, did you even sleep, man? Did you even, like, it hasn't been that long. Did you even get it? It's only been like 4 hours. Did you even sleep? My goodness.
I got that one. Oh yeah, there it is. Early Irish, what was it? Early medieval Ireland, AD 400 to 1100. The Evidence of Archaeology by Aidan O'Sullivan. So that's Aidan O'Sullivan's book on early medieval Ireland from 400 AD to 1100. And that covers a huge amount on Irish ring forts. So if you're into Irish ring forts, I would 100% tell you to grab that book. And I'm going through it now. It's a big, juicy book as well. So it'll take you a good bit of time to go slightly over it. But it is absolutely gorgeous to go through. Did I find the page that I was on? I'll go find it later, probably. Anyway.
Okay, well, my phone is whining about hunger, so we've got about 12% left, so I think we have time to wrap it up with some final questions or comments. But we should talk about what things we have upcoming for everyone. So while Philip looks up that book, I'll go ahead and tell you what I have upcoming. For those of you who like this iconic quote that I have, I'm actually offering a workshop on how to make this from scratch, from linen and scissors and thread all the way through to the finished product. I've implemented a pay what you will model. So if you go to the creativecontessa.com and make your own milkmaid coif and check out at, checkout, book it and check out, you can either pay the full $39.99 US for the 3-session workshop, or you can just pay what you will and enter in the tip field whatever you can afford to cover the cost of the workshop. So 3 Zoom sessions, not on YouTube. It will be via Zoom. I'll be able to see you. You'll be able to see me. I'll be able to see what you're doing. You can ask me questions with your voice and your face instead of in a live chat. So if you're interested in learning to make this very cool 15th century style kerchief, as it was called back then, check out the creativecontessa.com. That will be next, depending on your hemisphere, that will be next Saturday, the next 3 Saturdays, or the next 3 Sundays, 6 p.m. New York time, middle of the freaking night in Europe, sorry everyone, or 7 a.m. Asia on the Sunday, respective Sundays. So if you're interested in making your own milkmaid coif, which will have everyone calling you Amish and or Mormon, check that out. Otherwise, I'll have my usual random live streams throughout the week and our usual thing next Saturday. Philip, what do you have on this week?
I have a lot going on over my Patreon. This month, starting in the next few hours, if you're living in Europe and America and you're waking up on a nice Sunday night over in Ireland, if you head over to my Patreon, you can sign up for about 20 quid a month. This month, we are covering the rise of Brian Boru. So if you're a huge fan of the Emperor of the Gale, Brian Boru, definitely head on over to my Patreon. I am covering classes this month on the rise of Brian Boru, finishing up and wrapping up at the end of this month with the Battle of Clontarf and going into the High Middle Ages. Talking about High Middle Ages, the following 2 months then, I will have a series of classes covering the High Middle Ages, well, the start of the High Middle Ages in Ireland, going from 1014 all the way up to 1169. So I'll be covering that, which is a huge part of Irish history that everyone seems to skip because it's not important to the Irish nationalist image. Because remember, when you're covering modern Irish nationalism, we need to cover, Brian Boru and the Battle of Clontarf because we need to show our Irish identity. Then we need to cover our interaction between England and Ireland. So we covered the Norman invasion next. It skips a huge part of Ireland going into the High Middle Ages with the rise of the King of Ireland, Murtagh Brian, who changes the capital of Ireland from Cashel right here. He changes that capital and moves it over to Dublin. So he's the one that centralizes Dublin. And then on top of that as well, you also see the O'Briens, they end up getting usurped for the O'Connors. So you end up seeing the rise of the O'Connors. And most of this, what happens here in Cashel, they end up bringing German architects in. So I'll be talking about that this month. Did Ireland have ring forts? It's that kind of stuff I'll be covering. And on top of that as well, I'll also be covering Ireland and the Crusades, which is something we never get to cover because we skip over that. People then assume Ireland was never part of the Crusades. So I'll be covering that during my classes the following next 2 months after this month, which we'll be covering Brian Boru. So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, definitely head over to my Patreon. Or if you just want to support the channel and give what you can, definitely head over there as well. Also on top of that as well, next weekend, and I am looking into covering a video on the warfare in medieval Ireland. So I'll be covering the warfare in medieval Ireland, and I'll be reviewing the video game, the 2006 video game, Total War Medieval 2, which is the historical warfare game. So it's actually quite good. It's not too bad. There's a few clothing errors and stuff. There's enough errors to make a video. But it's not too much of a car crash. So I'll be reviewing that. And I'll be reviewing the military history inside of that as well. I think other than that, that's pretty much me set. Any ideas what you want to cover for a live stream next
well,
week,
we had a
Rachel?
request to bust medieval myths. I think that could be fun. I think that'll be fun. I think that will lead to lots of laughs and surprise. I think we should definitely. What do you all think? Let us know even in the chat. Do you think you want to see us bust some medieval myths? Because there are some, oh my God, doozies out there.
Yeah.
Jesus.
We're the Irish in the Crusades.
I mean, yeah, there were the Irish, some of the most devout people in medieval Europe did not go on crusade. Sure, that's going to happen. Yeah. Chance at a place in the kingdom of heaven? Nah, who wants that?
Especially after you cut off your brother's penis.
I mean, as one does. I mean, tales of
biggest crusade.
Tales of I know you're probably not referring to Abelard and Eloise, but that seems.
No, there was a guy in what was it? He was a warlord in Dublin, and then he got kicked out of Dublin because he was such a nice man, and he went to the Isle of Man, and he got into a land dispute with his brother, and he ends up cutting off his brother's genitals. And
how does one end
then he
up
went on
doing
crusade.
that? That's it's not that's not something that happens accidentally.
They believe it was. Yeah, they believe it was to what was it called? undermine his authority of the land, you know, so that way he couldn't have children, and that
Right.
way
Yeah.
he was less
It's,
likely to inherit the land, that he would take that. So that's what they think the
I mean,
reason
it
why he
makes.
did it. Maybe you just like to
I
not
mean, you
penises.
know, there's people have, everyone has their things. Some things are not good. Oh my God. Yeah, and if anyone
But on saying that,
if anyone wants to support my channel, I have a patron and channel membership, and there's a whole host of extra content, full tutorials, extra videos, uncut footage, full length, you know, the videos that I cut down into nothing. You can see what it all looked like before I cut it into something. So yeah, if you want to support my channel in a more monetary fashion, I do have patron and channel memberships. But yeah, so next week I'll be doing my medieval sewing party on Saturday morning my time, Friday evening most of your times, and then Sunday at some point, which Philip and I will have to discuss, we will be doing busting medieval myths. So if you have a medieval myth that you would like us to bust, don't pop it in the live chat because that's going to vanish. Pop it in the comments under this video when it posts on either of our two channels. So I think it should post on both. I think it should post on both. Right, you posted. Did the last live streams we've done together also post on yours?
could do.
You didn't check.
Probably does.
Yeah, so pop them in the comments under this live stream when it posts if there's a medieval myth you would specifically like us to address.
Definitely. Other than that, guys, thanks very much, and slán go.
Thank you all for joining us.
Oh, and Rachel, thanks very much for
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me. And thank you for learning to Fingerloop braid. It looked just exactly like it should have turned out. Nothing strange about
That's
it
my
at
one anyway.
all.
That's your case. No, just because the anchor might be a strange. Anyway.
Okay, everyone, stay creative, guys. Until next time. Oh my God, where did my screen go? Why is it doing this? Go here. Cancel. End stream. Yes.